Senhores, solicito que durante a apresentação não seja feita a passagem dos senhores pela tela. Então, toda a passagem de deslocamento deve ser feita pela retaguarda. Não deve ser feita passagem por frente da tela ou por trás do moderador. Obrigado. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Damas e cavalheiros, buenos dias. Senhoras e senhores, bom dia. Welcome to Hemispheric Cyber Defense Conference. Bienvenidos a la Conferência Hemisférica de Defensa Cibernética. Sejam todos bem-vindos à Conferência Hemisférica de Defesa Cibernética.
Welcome to all of you to this cyber conference.
Tradução simultânea para o português. Procure o botão de
We
tradução.
have translation into English and also into Portuguese. You will find the logo at the bottom. I'm the specialist in electronic warfare, commissioned as a signal officer from the Academia Militar das Águilas Negras. And I'm here to interact in the chat through Zoom. Your doubts will be taken into account, of course, by the Inter-American Defense Board. We will present our ideas in the chat, and you can also use the chat to visualize also new proposals. Present your suggestions for the next questions. How to reach international cooperation in cyber defense. During the conference, we will present very periodically the agenda that is going to be followed in our hemispheric conference of cyber defense, in which we will show you the presentations. We will start our activities with the opening remarks by General Richard Highcomb, who is here with his presence in the facilities of the soldier. He is part of the Army of the United States, and he is the director of the Defense College, and he will be in charge of giving the opening remarks for this cyber defense presentation. So it is a great pride for us to receive him here. Welcome once again. Please, General, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. It is very good to be here. General Salazar, I thank you very much for your invitation and the opportunity.
Right, to miss school, play hooky, except General Cadu, your friend, yes, has gotten a little too good at it. So I would appreciate maybe during one of the coffee breaks, you could counsel him. Maybe sometimes he actually comes to the class. But yes, my friends from Brazil. I don't know what I'd do without you. But no, Kadu and I take great pride in leading your college. You have entrusted us. You have elected us to this position to lead your college. You have given us a charter. And part of that charter, one of the most important parts of that charter, is to train our students on our history, on why this board was established. And we take that very seriously. And that why, that history, is very important, not just to the students of the college, but what we're going to talk about today. And so let's think about the history of the board and why the founding fathers established this board. So if you think about during World War II and what was happening in the Western Hemisphere, those leaders at the time were looking at what was happening in Europe and the great devastation that was happening there and the lack of respect towards sovereignty, the lack of respect towards governance and the rule of law and constitutions and borders. And the same thing was happening in Asia. And how could we ever prevent this from happening in the Western Hemisphere? And that's how that group of nations, our forefathers, came together to form the Inter-American Defense Board. That we would not allow nations to disrespect the fundamental foundation of democracy. And that's what we come here today to fundamentally talk about as well. We need everyone to be accountable to the rule of law, the authority of strong institutions, so that we can create trust and confidence that enables all nations of the Western Hemisphere to work together towards this common ideal. Now, this call to unity in 1942 is needed as much today as it was then. You see, then we worried about invasions. We worried about invasions. We worried about the hum of airplanes overhead, the rumble of tanks across our borders. We have the fear of invasions today, but those are silent invasions. Those are invasions that have no regard for sovereignty or borders or the rule of law. Those are invasions, cyber invasions, that completely undermine the people's fundamental trust in our institutions. This quiet cyber invasion of our borders, this invisible attack against our sovereignty, is that some companies and governments and nations try to fight the enemy alone, fearing disclosure will damage their reputation with their partners and with their people. Instead, this silence only foments distrust and doubt in these strong institutions we were talking about. It erodes the confidence we have as partners. So the answer to cyber defense is the same as it was in 1942. It's trust in strong institutions. It's cooperation and working together. It's sharing information. To share openly, we must work together and counter this threat. Cooperation is our strongest weapon. General Flavio, I must thank Brazil for its leadership in this effort. As General Kadu knows, all of the cyber work that we have going on within the college is provided by Brazil. And I want the nations here within the Inter-American Defense Board to know it would be far beneficial for Brazil to take all of these resources back and apply them to the same cyber threats that Brazil faces every day. But instead, Brazil is embracing exactly what I just said. Brazil cares about the defense of the entire hemisphere. We have to work together. We have to cooperate and share information. So rather than just worry about Brazil, Brazil is here today in Washington, D.C. Brazil is here with us to make us all stronger. Because if we're not all focused on cybersecurity, none of us will be safe. So thank you for your leadership from the country of Brazil, General Flavio, General Cadu. It can only be achieved through cooperation. I want to thank the board for those who put this together, this amazing opportunity for us to have this conversation. And I want to thank you, all of you who are participating today. Thank you for this opportunity, General.
General Highcamp, on behalf of the Organization
General
of American States and the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to express our gratitude for your participation in our event. Thank you very much. Apresentamos agora o primeiro palestrante.
Now we are going to present Luis Carlos de Souza,
Brinda com sua participação
that is going to participate from Sao Paulo, Brazil. His conference is, the topic of his conference is cyber resilience and constructing defenses against the threats. Luis Carlos, it's a pleasure for the board to receive your words here in the Inter-American Defense Board and in this room. Welcome once again. Luis Carlos, the floor is yours. Good morning to all the participants that accompany us in this very important event. I have to say good morning to Carlos Eduardo and also to the we need the video, please. We cannot see the video. Well, I highlight our great interest in sharing a little bit about our experience. For us, it is a great satisfaction to present a little bit about the work of the cyber sector that is so challenging. And we have sought the cooperation, and the key word is cooperation for our work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience in Brazil and how it happens so that we can show you all the opportunities that we have to approximate ourselves and to share experiences. Our purpose today is to talk a little bit about the strategies to strengthen the cyber resilience at the national and world wide, and to talk about the best practices in cyber security, and to talk a little bit about the integration of innovative technologies to improve the capacity to respond to any cyber event on a daily basis. We live a growing vulnerability because technology has brought more challenges. So we have to use it and to know how to have a minimum level of security. At this, now we're going to present our work. To have an idea, here we have an area around 8 million square kilometers and 14 million inhabitants and 245 million equipments that have access to internet. So it's more than one equipment per person, more than one computer per person. And Brazil has involved itself intensively in the digital area. Through the World Bank, we have been able to observe this information that Brazil is the second country in the world rank, almost 200 countries that offers citizens the digital service. So we have in Brazil, any citizen can have the opportunity to access any service. And this opens a great field to to be attacked. And we have to highlight that Brazil is the second largest attacked as country, and we have to deal with this situation almost every day and seek their collaboration every day so that we can have a very sound defense. The International Union of Communications is an agency of the United Nations that has published recently a ranking of the countries that have a level of security that is most adequate and that have a structure of procedures that highlight cybersecurity. The United States in first place, and we have Canada as well in eighth position, and Brazil is in the 18th position. We are proud, but at the same time, it gives us the courage to face that challenge and to share the information and procedures and to, in face of these new challenges and vulnerabilities that knock on our door every day, we have to use our best practices. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil. In 2008 and 2009, we worked on the national strategy for the PENSAIB, and we highlighted the Navy of Brazil in the nuclear area, the Air Force in the special air sector, and the Army in cyber security. And since then, we have worked in that area. And we have joined efforts with the Navy, with the Air Force, to be able to seek this state of resilience. At the level of knowledge, how is Brazil structured? The cabinet, the security cabinet of the presidency of the Republic is the great umbrella that covers the legislations and everything that has to do with administration and the rules to be able to operate within our country. At the strategic level, we have the Ministry of Defense, the head of the Joint Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, and also the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. And they're all working more in cyber defense, our area of responsibility. Going down to the operational level, we see that we have the Joint Command for Cyber Defense and the Joint Permanent Command that is permanently activated for fighting against the cyber war. And at tactical level, we have the Joint Cyber Commands to work in different actions at the tactical level. So the command of cyber security works at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels. And in this way, we can improve the cyber capacity in our country. To know how our defense command is structured, let's see. We have today the Center of Coordination of Cyber Operations that is under two-star of the Air Force of Brazil, the Center of Strategic Management that is under a two-star admiral that coordinates management, and we have a national school for cyber defense that seeks to develop all the capacities, both at the technical level as well as the tactical level. And the operational arm of the command, that is the cyber defense arm that is deployed with its means and structures to act in these areas of the cyber command. So this is an operational arm of the command to know, to have a notion of our mode of operation. A little bit about our history. Well, after the national history of defense, we had a great evolution in the sector, like everyone, and something that facilitated and that made us bring experience and integration. And this other word is very important as well, integration. In this way, Brazil was able to participate in several events like Rio Plus 20 and the Cup of the World 2014 and the Olympic Games of 2016. All these events helped us to be integrated and helped us to develop the capacities that are so important to have a more efficient defense and to understand and accompany the cyber international scenery. This is a little bit about our history and the way that Brazil has walked throughout the years. The Cabinet of National Safety, there is a decree that mentions a national plan of security in critical infrastructure. Here, safety and coordinating all the vulnerabilities in that sector. Within this scope of this national plan, the role is fundamental because it is to organize exercises, organize delegations, and to share information so that we can all be acting in a synergetic way and anticipating ourselves to our vulnerabilities. And once that we have done this, in 2018, we have started to perfect and develop these exercises called the cyber exercises. I am going to share with you the 5th edition of this exercise in Brazil. And I'm going to give you some more comments to show you this transition. In October,
infrastructure of national defense interest. The exercise aims to contribute to the integration between the executive branch, the private sector, and the academic community to protect the national cyberspace. It brings together the armed forces, partner organizations, academic institutions, and representatives of strategic sectors of the following areas: water, energy, nuclear, transportation, communications, finance, biosafety and bioprotection, defense, and digital government. About 150 organizations and companies with over 500 civilian and military participants are adopting protocols to address cyber incidents. Several authorities, including the Minister of Defense, foreign officials, and members of the Ibero-American Cyber Defense Foreign Forces, visited the event. The exercise aims to achieve significant outcomes for the states and society, including increased collaboration among cyber sector, stakeholders, and enhanced cyber resilience. The Cyber Guardia exercise is an important step towards making Brazil safer in cyberspace.
Bom, isso aqui é pouco da evolução do exercício. Ele teve início em 2018.
This is just some of the history. And we have like 1,000 organizations that are participating. And our focus was at the financial sector, the nuclear sector, and the defense sector. And through the years, we were adding some other participants, and we broadened the scope of the exercise. And we tried to make this participation more integrated through the sharing of good or best practices and some technical structures that give more efficiency to our cybersecurity. In 2022, we had like 120 organizations, 450 participants, and in 2023, we have worked in another place, and we used the High School of Defense in Brasilia, and we have created a hub in Sao Paulo, and we have worked in an integrated work in allowing all these stakeholders to participate in this event. So we talk about the digital government, energy, water, transportation, biosecurity, protection, defense, the financial sector that is a sector that invests a lot. And it is also the target of many attacks, the communications as well. And the great question about this exercise is that through a whole week, we try, through the whole year, really, we try to close the bonds and to share good practices. In 2023, we've had 150 organizations, and about 15 to 20 participants with international participation as well. The Center for Excellence of the NATO was here as well, and I'm going to talk later on about this, and the Inter-American Cyber Security. And all these have been with us trying to strengthen this bond that exists and that is necessary to strengthen our resilience. The academia has been present as well. The Military Institution of Engineers and many of the universities that are very well known have participated together with the regulating agencies, transportation, biosecurity of protection, the nuclear sector, the financial sector, water, and the hub here in Sao Paulo. So the question is credibility and trust that they have in the armed forces to sit together, the private and public sectors, and to have the trust to share good practices. The armed forces within our country has that trust. And then that's why it has been able to lead in such an important way all our stakeholders. So we work in what is called the UBICA, so that the companies can show their infrastructure and exercise and participate in the exercise. There is a call, a public call that is made virtually on infrastructure. There's a lot of publicity on command and control. So these are some of the partners that collaborated in the exercise, and every year we follow the same routine. During the event, we have also brought the forum, the Ibero-American Forum on cyber defense. So we have worked there in that forum where we share, and we brought observers as well, so that we can all integrate and show the work that is being done. And so that these good practices can be followed and shared. One of the examples, well, we have seen that it is a tool that has been created specifically for these participants, and then we share different procedures in the technical area. Today, Brazil is the Secretary pro tempore of the TIC and has collaborated with these activities, and the first week of October was in Brazil simultaneously to share this exercise. So what are the areas that have been worked? Construction, exercise in group, training, the crisis national cabinet, and how we're going to work with institutional security. The presidency of the Republic governed this, and some technical aspects. So it has been like a sum of events so that we can work with all the leadership of the companies and the Department of Telecommunications and the law and legal departments, and to see how each sector, each area, both entrepreneurial and public, has reacted in face of the different incidents, and how to react, how a company can react, how can we share in face of these challenges like an attack, a vulnerability, and how to proceed at the technical level, and also at the general level to be able to act in face of these threats and vulnerabilities. So the exercise had that purpose. It was carried out in Sao Paulo, as I said, and also in Brasilia. Our exercise in 2023, and this is the plan throughout the year. We used to meet and present all among the different sectors, the vulnerabilities, best practices, and in this way, we prepared all the incidents and we were able to share the best practices, and we built something stronger, more robust to respond to these cyber attacks. So it was 5 days of exercise. We gave different presentations. We had simulations, simulation problems, virtual simulations, and construction simulations. This is what we did throughout this week, and a little bit about the support that was established, because we had we opened a portal and the news on how to react and present solutions to the media. And reputation is fundamental as well, because how is the response that we're going to give in face of a problem like this? We have to be more technical, more constructive, and this has been our work. And also integration, the government, defense, public sector and private sector, and the academia. We have this joint group to present integrated solutions to present our cybersecurity plan. Throughout the year, we also published some books on social networks, cyber protection, and malicious actions. And there were many officials present, like the Minister of Defense, the head of the Joint Chief of Staff, and the head of the institutional cybersecurity, and members of the NATO. And so this is the model that Brazil has followed to share. And I can talk about the key. Key is cooperation. The exercise of Cyber Guardian is always restructured, reanalyzed with the demands that we receive every day. And the forum, the Ibero-American Forum, allows us to work in an integrated way, sharing and joining ourselves in face of these vulnerabilities. And now we can observe in our national map that it has changed. Connectivity shows the submarines integrating the different continents. So these are different times, and to combat these vulnerabilities, the key word is cooperation. Within this, we have worked and we have sought every day to share and integrate all this information to strengthen our defense. Well, in this way, we present what Brazil is doing and what are the next steps. And we are open to broaden our cooperation. Yesterday morning, we were with the Southern Command of the United States working on the different opportunities for integration and cooperation. These are words of excellence that we are trying to strengthen ourselves with. And you have seen the world scenario where there are new attacks, different attacks, new techniques, new tactics, and we have to be watchful to find the capacity to respond to all this. And this has been our challenge. So we have to strengthen all and to find a solution. So I thank you, and I am at your order for any questions that could be asked after my presentation.
General Luiz Carlos, muito obrigado por sua apresentação, na qual conhecemos uma visão sobre a resiliência cibernética, construindo defesas robustas contra ameaças emergentes.
We followed the topic on the cyber resilience, and you have highlighted some relevant aspects, and the level of connectivity that is so important, and you highlighted the level and how we have been able to integrate ourselves with a trust and resilience in the cyber sector. You showed the structure in Brazil to face all these challenges. Some questions that we have here, considering the work of the board. What is the importance of the international cooperation? It is fundamental for us to be integrated. And for this integration, we have the word called trust, proximity.
Das melhores práticas é fundamental. É uma maneira da gente entender como os inimigos, que nós falamos assim, do espaço cibernético, os atores que atuam no espaço cibernético, buscando atingir as nossas vulnerabilidades, como a gente pode nos fortalecer. Então, o caminho é compartilhamento de boas práticas, desenvolver exercícios conjuntos e nos integrarmos para termos uma resposta efetiva. Nós sabemos que diariamente
We know that daily we are working with these threats. Especially, I would like to mention Brazil, the financial branch, but also the answer, it's essential, I think. The sharing of the procedures, of some of the systems, the best practices, everything is fundamental. As I said, this is the way. Integration, so we can all be straightened towards these vulnerabilities that we are facing every day. Some of the questions and the products that have been presented during the cyber exercise take us to the following question: how the countries of America can apply and execute these measurements? Well, I believe that the exercise has a technical part and some management. Brazil is open for the interaction to be able to work together, because I believe that the experiences that we are developing in Brazil are fundamental and are always able to share with everyone who is interested. So I believe that the Inter-American Forum on Cyber Information has also some important key actors. We are always open in Brazil, and we love the works cooperation to be able to integrate the ones who want to visit, the ones who want to work with us, and to see the opportunity of integration. Again, we are open, and it's an honor for us to be together on this challenge. Now, the question goes for cyber resiliency. In your perspective, what is the most important challenge to achieve this resiliency? But I think that we are all vulnerable in attacks. We have been seeing critical structures. We have been seeing especially this. We need a rapid response. We need a holistic response. We need to be able to have the basic structure for a country. What I mean by this is we are connected nowadays. We need to use the infrastructure. We need to use the cyberspaces. So the great challenge is to have an immediate response, to be prepared to different attacks. Obviously, we have had different vulnerabilities, different attacks. And for this, we need to be paying close attention to the updating of the systems, but also we need to be ready to give a rapid response. So we need the structure of rapid response so we can keep the intention, the action on different sectors. General Luis Carlos, these topics that you have discussed, unfortunately, we are running out of time. So on behalf of OAS and IADB, I would like to say how grateful we are for the work that you're doing on cyber defense, for your participation, but also for the amazing presentation. Thank you. Yes, thank you. And again, we are open. I would like to repeat this as many times as possible. I salute everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Apresentamos agora o próximo palestrante do nosso evento, Coronel Blanc, que nos agracia com sua presença.
Now we present the next presenter. He
lidará com a apresentação Cooperação na Cibernética Atual. Lições aprendidas.
Armed Forces of Canada, and we are going to see some lessons learned and good practices. It's a pleasure for us to receive you here in the House of Soldier. Thank you for being with us this morning.
General Flavo, board members, distinguished guests, cybersecurity experts, cyber defenders, representatives of the armed forces, policymakers, and industry leaders, good morning. Let me start off with the first slide, which is going to talk about cyber operations at the speed of trust. And this is an important aspect of our lessons learned and our observations in conducting some of our operations today. So first off, I would like to say thank you on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Force Commander, Rear Admiral Caroselli, for having us here today to discuss cyber operations. It is always a privilege to speak at events like these, since it also provides an opportunity to share our experiences and to also foster discussions. To give you an example of the size and scope, as you can see there, the entire leadership on the operational side is on that screen. We have the Rear Admiral, we have Brigadier General Yarker and myself, a very small leadership cadre leading our forces that are responsible for cyber operations, SIGINT, and joint electronic warfare. As the Chief of Staff of Operations, it is my responsibility to bring strategic coherence and unity of effort to a complex and rapidly evolving domain for my nation's military cyber forces in order to defend our networks and our information technology, both at home and globally deployed. Cyberspace is critical when conducting modern military operations, as we've heard earlier in our presentations. And this is why the Canadian Armed Forces defends its own networks. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, it's over 250 networks that we currently have right now. Our adversaries have demonstrated sophisticated cyber espionage and offensive cyber capabilities for use in competition, crisis, and conflict. Indeed, potential adversaries are developing and leveraging cyber capabilities to attempt to exploit vulnerabilities in our command and control communication systems, our computers, our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems. In addition to the threat posed by state actors, we're seeing a variety of proxies, inspired individuals, with many of them with different motivations, cyber criminals, hacktivists, terrorists, thrill seekers, and even a potential insider threat that will continue to increasingly sophisticated means to disrupt our networks. We must therefore continue to make the necessary efforts to not only keep up with the threat, but also stay ahead of them to fight and win in this ever-changing, human-made, man-made terrain, which is very different than the other domains that we have out there. Furthermore, given the borderless nature of cyber threats, it is all important that we be engaged in the world with allies and partners. Okay. So what do we do? First of all, it's a small, I think I went too fast here. I think I got it. All right, so first of all, we are a small and growing cyber force. We're still in the early stages of getting our command and control construct right, of developing our force generation processes, our force management processes in place, and to be able to support the greater CAF construct. As I mentioned, with over 240 networks, we're extremely busy. And we don't do this by ourselves. We work with allies and partners, but we also work with an interagency construct. So what does that lead to is what is our mission? If you see on the slide here in the top left-hand corner, we conduct full spectrum cyber operations to include offensive, defensive, cybersecurity cooperation, capacity building, and we do that in close coordination with allies, partners, and host nations. This is critical, which leads us to our actual operational priorities. First of all, to defend those networks, we have a security operations center that's manned by the military, and that works 24/7, making sure that we have full situational awareness on all of our networks. That's always a challenge when you have so many. And it's not just at home, but it's also deployed abroad. Our first set of priorities, again, is homeland defense of our own networks to ensure the effective command and control for senior leadership. The next is our support to other government departments and partners in the cybersecurity incident response construct from a national perspective. And Major General Carlos mentioned that. He kind of showed how in Brazil they do the whole of government approach. We do the same thing. Lots of national security and intelligence partners are involved in this effort. The next, of course, is our support to Government of Canada and the Chief of Defence Staff in the delivery of cyber effects. We've been delivering those effects now for quite some time, and the intent here is to ensure that we meet the Government of Canada's strategic priorities when it comes to cyber operations and the Chief of Defence Staffs. We also support operational level commanders, our special operations forces, our joint command organizations, and our services, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. And of course, no less important is support to allies and partners, which will be the focus of my observations and lessons learned a little bit later on. I will tell you that none of the success that we've had currently on operations would be there without our interagency work and our work with key partners, especially our Communication Security Establishment and our Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which actually deploys on most of our operations with us, just to give you an idea of how that approach has taken place. Okay, let's talk a little bit about operations today. Right now, as I speak, the Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Forces are executing persistent cyber and SIGINT operations in support of the government. We are globally engaged, and we do this through standing cyber task forces. These task forces, and the first one I'll talk about is actually focused on the Ukraine. That task force has been in existence now for over almost 700 days. That one was stood up after the invasion in Eastern Europe, and is designed to provide security support and assistance to our Ukrainian friends. That task force operates 24/7. It assists our Ukrainian counterparts against malicious activity and adversarial activity, and is manned by a permanent team of folks. That's been a very successful operation for us, and it also allows us to share best practices, lessons learned, licenses, software, TTPs, and subject matter expertise. The next task force we have is in support of Latvia, and that's a persistent task force that's actually geographically located in Latvia, and is conducting joint threat hunts with our Latvian partners. Another operation that's been on the go for about 700 days now. That operation, to give you an idea of what cyber speed looks like, started off as a small team going forward, linking up with the host nation, developing a request for support, and then deploying soldiers forward to be able to assist. All that took place in 6 days. So from the initial request to a reconnaissance element being on the ground, to national agreements to how to stand up this task force and to start operations was all done within 6 days. This is the speed of cyber that we need to do when we're working with allies and partners. Now, we also have task forces dedicated to continental defense and support to NORAD. And we have task forces that are in the early stages of being stood up to work in the Indo-Pacific region. And for us, we've looked at this through the global lens. And even though cyber knows no geography, we have had to focus kind of from a regional construct. So what have been some of the lessons learned coming out of these operations? Number one, relationships and trust are the master keys. This means investment in liaison officers. This means face-to-face meetings. This means travel. And I say that because you cannot establish trust in the cyber domain through a computer screen. You can only do it face-to-face. And that's been our experiences in setting up multiple task forces out there. Hence why I'm here today. Why I decided that it was better to come here and actually do it face-to-face than try to do it through a system. And I have no excuse. We're only an hour and a half away. The speed of trust with partners is also critical to success. Remember, it is their network. It is their vulnerability. It is their compromise. We are there in a supporting role to that incident. We have been mostly successful at coming in at the tactical and operational level with our partners and allies, not always at the strategic level from the top. And the reason I say that is that sometimes when we've attempted to try to develop relationships with allies and partners, and we've gone through the normal process of coming through our policy, our legal constructs, etc. It took a long time. You know, the bureaucracies of governments is slow. However, when we're able to come in at the tactical and operational level, have those discussions, it was our partners and our allies that sold the value and the criticality of the mission to their own leadership, making it a lot easier to get concurrence, to be able to do things in a joint manner. We also took a little bit different approach than some nations. We took a very deliberate and incremental approach to establishing that trust. We went in, a lot of times we probably started with networks and doing hunt operations on networks that might not have been critical, but as we worked together, we developed that trust. It got more and more complex, and we're able to work on more and more sensitive systems based on the needs of our partners. So the other aspect of that is that we made a commitment that we weren't going to come in, do a short-term activity and then leave, that we were going to develop an enduring relationship. And when we think that's been key to our success. I mentioned a couple of those task forces. There are others, but that's been the key to our success. The other issue was the depth of the relationship. You know, you can do a lot of work sometimes on some of the networks that are not as critical for the partner, might be more important from our perspective, but at the end of the day, it was our abilities to be persistent versus episodic. And like I said, they're trying to build that depth into the infrastructure that we're trying to protect. We've used a task force construct. We did not have set organizations that we deployed forward for these task forces. We built every single task force differently. We made sure there was a command and control element. There was a real life support element, a intelligence element to this. And then we decided, based on the needs of the partner and what we were looking at, as to how that element below that. Is it more software engineers? Is it more forensics? Is it more cyber analysts? And we determined what that would look like. So every single task force is task tailored for the missions that are going out there. And those task forces would not be successful that are forward deployed without strong and effective reach back to the enterprise back in Ottawa. At the end of the day, we can only put a very small presence forward, but the real bulk of work on the intelligence side, on the systems side, takes place back home. And so that conductivity, that reach back is critical for supporting the deployed task forces. The other aspect that's been critical is the use of off-the-shelf technology. We've spent millions of dollars developing high-speed tools for the cyber domain, but the reality is the majority of the time we are using off-the-shelf technology, which has proven faster, cheaper, and easier to use, especially when dealing with allies and partners. Of course, when we download that software, we make sure it's safe. We might modify it using our software engineers and then reinstitute it and use it as a tool. But that's what has been worked for us so far in some of our task forces. The other issue that's been critical is the employment of smart officers and soldiers and operators who have inquisitive minds, that are well educated, and understand this very complex domain. We're always dealing with wicked problems, and they need to be able to adapt quickly, because when we're working with allies and partners, the networks that we're working on sometimes are very dissimilar to the experiences that they have had working back home. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but the reach back capability is critical, but also our abilities to bring whole of government partners with us on these operations. As I mentioned, I would say a big part of our success has been able for us to bring folks from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity, maybe some folks from other organizations that are non-traditional in the cyber domain, because they always bring certain authorities, skill sets, capabilities, or tools to the cyber task force. And I'll be honest with you, we have learned by doing. We've participated in hundreds of exercises, but at the end of the day, it seemed to be very repetitive. Where we think we've had success and where we've been able to grow the cyber force has been in actually conducting operations, getting out there, getting after the problem, dealing with real adversaries in the cyber domain, learning about those adversaries, and then modifying and changing our approach. So we're learning by doing. And we don't just learn about the adversaries, we learn about ourselves, our gaps, our challenges, but we also learn about our allies and partners and where they have gaps and challenges and capacity issues that we might be able to assist in. I will tell you one of the issues where we are still struggling, and this is the integration of private and public and industry into our cyber task forces. We're not there yet. We are continuing to work on that challenge. Difficult for us from a security clearance perspective, also from a ability to integrate them into our deployed elements around the world. But we are continuing to figure out how we're going to bring the industry and that private public relationship into the fight. So I was mentioned by the previous speakers, we're not alone. And the key to what we believe to some of our success has been ensuring that we have shared awareness, shared understanding, and unity of effort in our cyber operations. We've invested a lot in this space, and we will continue to do so going forward. So I'll pause there and just mention that I'd like to thank the organizers for this event. I know there's a lot of work that goes on in this space, and I'm happy to transition into questions because I think that's where the real discussion will be and having some conversations about our experiences in this fight.
All right. Dear Colonel Blank, thank you for your presentation, which gained insight.
Muchísimas gracias por la presentación. Tenemos algunas preguntas acerca de las amenazas.
Mission of the Canadian Cyber Force and priorities adopted in mission execution. You especially emphasized the lessons learned while operation in cyber activities. According to the presentation, you said the relationships and trust are critical, and you also showed real cyber operations and special partners that we have. We have received also some questions from Angela Carrasco Joffre from Chile. What is the question? What kind of barriers can be found from the countries to enter in a joint system to act in cyber defense? Joining all this information, I will give you some questions. Based on the lessons learned from recent conflicts, what is the opinion on the establishment of a hemispheric cooperation framework for cyber defense in Americas?
Look, I think anytime we have the opportunity to...
I think this one's better.
Okay, I'll take that one. I think if we build any type of constructs to bring cyber experts and national security experts together, it's a good thing. However, I will caution that a lot of times when you're conducting cyber operations with allies and partners, one of the key aspects of this is that they might not be comfortable doing it in a multinational construct, that they might be more comfortable in doing it in a bilateral construct because of intelligence sharing, information sharing, etc. So I would say that having some type of coordination construct is good. It's a start point for conversations. It allows us the sharing of best practices, lessons learned, and of course, as I spoke about earlier, learning from each other, but it might be the conduit to the establishment of bilateral operational activity.
Thank you so much for this information. And we have also another question. From past lessons learned, which do you believe is the most critical for implementation by the countries in the Americas with fewer resources from cyber defense?
I think it was mentioned by the previous two speakers, General Carlos, General Heinkamp, mentioned the issues of teamwork. We are not alone. We need to be able to work together. We need to figure out how to share information and sometimes intelligence at the speed of cyber. That is difficult in some certain constructs, but I think that's the key. If we're going to have effective teamwork, we need to figure out how we're going to share information very quickly and what those mechanisms are going to be. We're going to have to sometimes maybe even accept some risk in achieving those effects.
And what, in your opinion, is the most crucial interpersonal characteristic that should be trained in cyber defense personnel?
I'm not a training expert, but my experience in seeing the team working on all these challenges and problem sets is that a baseline, a very solid baseline of education is critical for our cyber officers and our cyber operators. It's a lot more than most people realize. Imagine having cyber officers that require a 4-year undergraduate degree, another 2 years in a master's degree in computer science or software engineering or artificial intelligence or machine learning. So that's 6 years of education, then probably another 2 years of training, and then some experience on top of that. We're talking about, to develop a cyber officer, about 8 years of investment. That's significant. And there's the same for our non-commissioned members. A significant amount of investment in education and training. That's part one. Part two is, as I said before, is getting them out, doing operations. They learn 10 times faster and more, and with some significant amount of relevance to that learning when they're doing the operations. And then the last point I would mention is we need to have members of the cybersecurity and cyber defense team be inquisitive minds, folks that want to tackle the wicked challenges and the problems that are out there, folks that are going to go and probably take sometimes a non-traditional approach to looking at a problem set. Because as you know, in the military, we have, as we go up through our training over the years, we have normally a very set kind of construct of how to look at things. We need folks that are prepared to think outside the box. And that's tough, especially in the military construct sometimes.
Thank you so much. Now I will go to the question of Angela Carrasco Joffre again. Okay, she said, what are the big barriers that the countries can find to act together?
I think the barriers are trust. At the end of the day, one of the challenges we have is how do we establish that trust? And this board is a good example of an instrument, an entity that's designed to try to establish that trust, break down those barriers of communication, and be able to work together. So it's continuous conversations, continuous engagement, especially in this very important domain, to establish that trust, establish those relationships, investment, like I said, in liaison officers, investment in personnel to make sure that we can establish that trust and those relationships. That's what we need to ensure that we break down.
Perfect. And we saw a lot of lessons learned. How the countries can use the experience of Canada in that lessons learned.
Look, I would just say from a Canadian perspective, we're a small country, and especially in population size, and we are still learning. And I will tell you that I don't think we have all the answers at all. I think we are in the early stages of learning about this domain in depth based on our operational experiences. And I don't think that it is dissimilar from any of you here in the room or any of the nations participating in the conference today. We are all learning by doing. We just have one view of things, but we're learning a lot. And I think we are happy to share our experiences and our lessons learned with our allies and our partners. I think that's critical.
Colonel Blanc, despite the remaining questions, our time for discussions has come to an end. Colonel Blanc, your insights have been invaluable. On behalf of the Organization of the American States and the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to express our gratitude for your work in the field of cyber defense. your participation in our event and the excellence of the presentation delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Apresentamos o próximo palestrante de nosso
We're
evento.
going to present the next participant, Agnes Kafta. She is the director of the NATO, and she is here at the House of the Soldier in this Hemispheric conference. Doctor will present cyber diplomacy and challenges and opportunities for hemisphere cybernetic work. It is a pleasure to receive you here in the House of the Soldier, in the Council of Delegates. Welcome. We are ready for your presentation. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Good morning. First of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation, and thank you very much for the organizers to allowing and giving me the opportunity to speak about this important topic here today. So today I will talk about, sorry, I'm just trying to figure this out. Yeah. Okay. This one is working. There. Okay. No. There is a bit. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. I'm figuring out the technology as well here in real time. So there are already challenges here. So very quickly, I would like to say that I'm not talking on behalf of NATO. I'm not talking about on behalf of any organization. I'm here talking in private capacity. So please. There, okay, yeah, okay. So not necessarily representing the views of the NATO CCD-COE. So the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence is where I'm coming from. I'm the head of the law branch, but also interesting hearing about the educational challenges from the previous speaker. I'm also a lecturer, senior lecturer of cybersecurity and law for the last 10 years. So I'm very well aware of the challenges there. So quickly about the NATO CCD-COE. And about the presentation today, I'm going to cover a few words about cyber diplomacy and the content of cyber diplomacy, the key challenges there. So I will talk about a little bit cyber stability and international norms, but my main points are going to concern international law and how it applies in cyberspace, and what kind of regional cyber diplomacy efforts I encountered in the regions that I'm mostly interacting with, and what might be interesting for the future. So quickly about the NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. Imagine it as a think tank, a very specialized think tank. So it's an international multidisciplinary cyber defense hub established in 2008. It's accredited by NATO, but I have to say that this is not within the NATO structure. That's an important part of the story here. So our mandate is to support our 39 nations, basically with training, exercises, and research. So, and usually this is the point when I'm saying that what we are not doing operations. Okay, we do quite a lot of other things, but we do not engage in cyber operations. That's not within our mandate. We cooperate with our nations, with NATO, with academia, with private sector, with many actors, yeah, and help them also stay relevant and keep the cutting edge. So you can see on this map our member nations. It goes beyond NATO. We have non-NATO member states as well here. So, as I said, there are the key activities that we are doing are research, training, and exercises in 4 domains that are relevant in cyber defense. We focus on technology, we focus on strategy, operations, and law. And in this combination, we provide our research, we do research and training and our exercises. So a few flagships that you may have already encountered. For example, we are the organizers and we do the lock shields, the largest cyber defense live fire exercise. Here, of course, all of those domains and areas that I showed you before, technology, operations, strategy, and law are relevant. We have technical exercise, so there is technical part of that exercise. We have a strategy track, yeah, so decision makers get to play the game, and also we have a legal track. So we train the lawyers in relation to the scenario that we established for the purposes of the game. We also have crosswords. That's offensive focused exercise, much smaller than the lock shields. We have CyCon, the international conference we had already for 15 years. And for lawyers and those who have legal background, they will probably know the Tally manual. Yeah, that is produced on the invitation of the center, and our name is associated with Tally manual. The CCDCOE is now focusing on 5 capabilities of our members. Yeah, we help them build capability to conduct cyber operation based on common frameworks. And probably this is the most relevant focus area for my branch, the legal branch. Common frameworks. Here we can mean common legal frameworks, so translated into international law, for example, international norms and rules. But common frameworks for the technology experts, I mean common standards, for example, and technical standards, etc. So, but also we are focusing on other areas and other capability building areas, multi-domain operations, multinational combined operations in their requisites, capability of our member states to conduct military civilian cyber operations, and of course, the public-private partnerships. So you can see our activities have quite a broad reach, and there is a high level of complexity that we are trying to navigate here. And a lot of times, I find it very important to talk about all of these areas to other actors, partners, to speak up about our products, our activities, and share with others in conferences like this. and in other fora as well. So where it comes, and this is where it comes to the question of cyber diplomacy. In certain areas, when we're talking about relations between nations, for example, and UN negotiations, that's what most of the people call cyber diplomacy. But I also call cyber diplomacy the level of exchanges and level of relations at the technical level. You can call it diplomacy track 2.0, for example. And what we heard that might be more effective actually than talks involving bureaucracy and policy and procedures. Nevertheless, diplomacy, cyber diplomacy, to us relates to resolving issues arising from the international use of cyberspace. And simply, the tools of diplomacy and diplomatic mindset are applied. So diplomacy, cyber diplomacy may not mean completely new area or field. It's just that what the diplomats are trying to tackle, what kind of problems. So that distinguishes cyber diplomacy from other areas of diplomacy for us. So it's focusing on state behavior in cyberspace, and it's done by the traditional diplomats. If you go and look at the UN negotiations in the open-ended working group, you will find that there are classical diplomats involved in the processes. And what they're discussing, what we are also discussing and trying to have our voices heard, cyber stability and international security, international law and cyberspace, especially for my department. Fighting cybercrime is a typical item on the agenda, and engagement on the regional fora, as well as global internet governance and internet freedom. Typically, these would be, I think we would agree with many of the experts that these are the items on the agenda. Cyber stability framework, that's something that probably has the most broadest concept here. It involves international law, norms, cyber confidence building measures, capacity building. And if you are familiar with the reports and documents coming out from the UN group of governmental experts and the UN open-ended working group discussing cyber issues, you will see that the reports are structured in a similar way. They talk about capacity building, confidence building, international law, and norms all together. International law and norms can be referring to existing international law already that we already have, like the UN Charter, okay, or existing treaties. That can be non-binding, so soft laws here, or general principles, political agreements, but they share a common trait. But they express the shared expectation of behavior. So all of them talk about how should states behave in cyberspace. Okay, I will come back to that a little bit later. So the idea behind that we have these common ideas about, or norms and rules about how should a state behave in cyberspace is to reduce the risks to international peace, provide more stability, security, and I would say predictability. What can I expect from my counterpart? How, well, with some likelihood, they are going to behave or not behave. So all this contributes to prevention of conflict. So norms and existing international law complement each other in a very special way. In the reports of the UN groups, you will find norms, principles of responsible state behavior, very specific to cyberspace. On the other hand, existing international law that was, for example, made back in the 1940s, 1950s, or emerged during the last decades, may not be specific to cyberspace at all. Yeah. Now the focus is on substantiating norms and dealing with the challenges of accountability in two main global discussion forums. The first committee and in the third committee. The UN groups in the first committee have been discussing general issues that concern state behavior. And now in the third committee, and that was an initiative of the Russian Federation, there are discussions about the need and the draft of a convention, a new UN convention for cybercrime. The process of discussing the rules and norms in cyberspace, what might apply, it's been actually going on for the last 25 years. It was in 1998, the Russian Federation introduced this idea, draft resolution, and started the discussion about regulating some way cyberspace at the international level. Then discussion groups, working groups were established, and they delivered some results also, but they are also, these groups, the open-ended working group and the UN and the committees, also a place where discussions are going on, and you can see the fragmented application or fragmented approaches and the different approaches. What should be done? Should there be a new convention, or should there be a different process that might clarify the actual rules and actual norms in cyberspace? So there has been competing proposals put forth in the UN. So the principles and norms of responsible state behavior that are cyber-specific. I put here an illustrative picture here that what might we talk about. The trick about these ones is that they use the language of what should be done, what is recommended, yeah, more or less. So there is no specific enforcement mechanism if a state behaves in contravention of any of these norms, principles of responsible state behavior. However, these norms, and when they are written down and they are elaborated on, these could be the ones that may lead in the future to binding rules and binding agreements. What is the consensus right now? And I would probably be right when I say global consensus, and what is actually binding is not that much at the moment. Consensus in international law and cyberspace. The first step was made in 2013 when the government, a group of experts, agreed that international law applies in cyberspace. And then in 2015, the General Assembly actually reaffirmed and kind of agreed with this position. And pretty much that's where we are at the moment. And this is where competing proposals are coming in. International law applies, but how it applies. And this is where the nations and the countries who wanted to have a say in the process, how we interpret international law, what are the actual rules when it comes down to the application? How do you apply these rules? So these are the nations so far who have expressed their positions in these matters. I think we have here something around 30 states who have what I would say comprehensive positions on how international law applies in cyberspace. However, this is where the countries cannot agree. Two competing proposals that are at the moment in the UN. Last week, it was just last week, when the Russian Federation and a few like-minded nations proposed a draft resolution saying that we need a new convention, new cyber convention. The other group of states, France, US, and other like-minded states are saying and arguing that no, actually, hey, we have the rules. We just need to agree and discuss that how they apply and whether there are any gaps. Do we need some new rules? I don't know. We have not discussed it yet. So should not jump to conclusions and should not jump into creating a new convention. So this is as new as last week, another attempt or another pair of competing resolutions were introduced here. Generally, what are we talking about? We are talking about the areas of law that already are there. We have rules for these areas. And this is what the national positions are talking about. And actually, these are where some of the new proposals also want to challenge the applicability of some of the concepts, some of the basic frameworks that has been there for decades. Generally, these are the areas that the national positions cover. Now, last June, no, it was in July, when the group discussing these issues, how international law applies, etc., delivered its final 2023 report and said that we need more national views on how international law applies. So it encourages the countries to actually think about it and come up with their own national positions, saying, for example, as usually these countries start their national positions, okay, we think sovereignty applies in cyberspace this way and this way. For example, we think that sovereignty is a rule and a principle. Therefore, as a rule, it can be violated. Then, for example, continuing that, okay, due diligence applies in cyberspace this way and that way. State responsibility applies, etc. So this is something what states who have already their national positions typically would discuss. Yeah, there are many actors, many states who still are in the process of considering whether or not to come up with a comprehensive national position. For these and for others who may not even be aware of the importance of this process and of why we need these national positions, it's important that there is a forum and there is a process now established in the UN to have case-by-case discussions, scenario-based discussions when there might be more clarity on some of the legal points and what could be in these national positions, which country would prefer which approach. And this is where also the report calls for capacity building in areas of international law. So, and I would point out here that capacity building efforts and resources have already been there. So, for example, our center's project, the Tally Manual, is basically gives a very comprehensive list of possible approaches, possible interpretations, how international law and the specific rules of international law could apply to cyber operations. It's not law, it's never been, but what it is, a very useful catalog of ideas that if you open it, you can agree with the interpretation or you can disagree with the interpretations, right? So it's a useful tool, it's a useful resource for nations to actually think about their own positions, okay? Then we have already the cyber law toolkit, scenario-based resource that we are using in our trainings. We are using it in our research, in our work. This is bridging the gap between academia and practice, so training and the actual interpretation and actual application of international law. And this is free. This has been there. This is completely free. It's on the internet. It's crowdsourced approach. We have new calls for new scenarios each year. This year, 1st of December, we are waiting for new scenario proposals, which will be reviewed by a team of 30 experts. And that's where how these scenarios and the analysis behind them gets their way to the toolkit. And then we have a new initiative. And when we are talking about the new recommendation from the UN report that we need more national positions, this is where we also see at the NATO CCDCOE that we need to engage in capacity building and help assist nations. Nations also in Europe, outside Europe. Actually, this is a global issue. This is a global issue. So what we are doing, we are also want to provide guidance on actually drafting these national positions. Our experts have seen these processes. This is our field of expertise. We have 5 core partners in this project that we are starting this year. University of Exeter, Chatham House think tank in the UK, the NATO CCDCOE, and 2 governments, Japan and Estonia, engaged in this process. And we are going to have international workshops, 3 of them. We are going to have consultations with those people who have the experience and who have been in various countries already engaged in these drafting processes. And we are going to have the lessons learned from them and then give practical guidance on the procedures, on the content, on the policy dilemmas, etc., on these issues in a handbook format and in a few articles and other publications. So that's what we see. There are other cyber diplomacy efforts on the regional levels. And a few of them I just want to mention here. And this will be, again, in line with those presentations and the content what was said before. How important is trust? How important is confidence building and cooperation? For example, the OSCE already in 2016 had a recommendation that invited proposals. Okay, how can we do confidence building? What else we can do but confidence building in cyber areas? And there were many recommendations, actually very concrete proposals coming in, and the OSCE is now implementing them. I just put here the last 3 press releases from them that demonstrates or illustrates what can be done. So, for example, consultations on vulnerability, coordinated vulnerability disclosure, or they have consultations on UN Program of Actions for Cybersecurity, or here, the another one doing reports. EU has already defined its pretty clear approach to cyber diplomacy. So they put together a toolbox saying that, okay, this is how we see it, and this is what we will be doing. So you can see the cyber diplomacy measures that they are using. They range from confidence and capacity building to cyber sanctions and to more forceful reactions. In theory, that this is the toolbox, and they will choose according to the needs. Of course, just need to mention here this EU and its EU cybersecurity policy is way more complex and economic focused. So there is way more to that part from the EU. And lastly, there is another regional cooperation that I like to emphasize that this is already out there. The Cybercrime Convention in the Council of Europe. That's pretty much the only one international and binding law that is cyber specific. Yeah, and it's been there since 2001. Already provides on a very important and very challenging area, the fights against cybercrime, a legal framework, an international cooperation framework, and also cooperation with regard to electronic or digital evidence. It's open for countries outside of the Council of Europe, and it provides lots of other benefits, especially capacity building, but especially in the form of the second additional protocol that deals with collection and exchange of digital evidence. Yeah, that's a new protocol. Signature started from last year, and it deals in very practical terms with how to address and how to collect digital evidence across jurisdictions. And here it provides a legal framework that actually says that law enforcement of one country can turn to the service provider in the private sector of another country directly if you sign this protocol. Okay? So you don't have to go through lots of bureaucratic hurdles and other questions. So few observations here. I believe that the confidence building measures at the regional level and consultations are an alternative to a new cyber treaty. Discussions, opening up, sharing the concepts, sharing approaches. Yeah, I think that would just perfectly do the job, and no need to jump into premature conclusions about the need for a new cyber treaty at the global level. So this is why the national positions are important. And here, for example, the EU is doing consultations, trying to come up with a common position on how international law applies. So, and definitely conducts consultations and coordinates with its member states. There's growing complexity here, and we heard from previous speakers about how important the non-governmental actors are and private-public consultations and projects. So, and I would also just close my presentation with saying that there are a lot of things out there already. I would find it necessary and important to build on existing achievements and ongoing projects. And I illustrated for you that what is already out there, even free tools, the cyber law toolkit, the tally manuals, and then we are doing new projects. But it's not only us, there are other actors, for example, there is the Oxford process that is also putting out a lot of material and engaged in many of these capacity building efforts. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm happy to respond to questions.
Dr. Agnes, to maintain the time, I will give the questions now. Okay. The subject cyber diplomacy is quite new, comprehensive, and engagement. In this regard, how can diplomacy contribute to building a secure and resilient cyber environment in America?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think that the basic principles and basic ideas do not depend on geography. The trust and cooperation, this is not specific to the Organization of American States, but they can use to actually enhance stability and security in cyberspace. This would work exactly the same way, whether you are in Americas or in Europe or in the ASEAN region, wherever. So in that sense, it is the confidence building measures that I will always come back to. It is the coordination and consultations and cooperation, which I will always return to. Doesn't matter what region of the globe we are talking about.
Perfect. As the allotted time to question to Agnes Kasper comes to an end, we bid farewell to our speaker. Dr. Agnes Kasper, on behalf of the Organization of the American States and the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to express our gratitude for your work in the field of cyber defense, your participation in our event, and excellence of the presentation delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Senhoras e senhores, passamos agora para um intervalo de 10 minutos. Senhoras e senhores, solicitamos que todos tomem assento para Vamos agora para as atividades de nossa Conferência Hemisférica de Defesa Cibernética. Apresentamos como próximo palestrante do nosso evento, Wade Lance, que nos agracia também com sua presença nas instalações da Casa do Soldado. O senhor Wade Lance é Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, na empresa Synec, e apresentará outros aspectos relacionados à inteligência artificial, defesa cibernética e segurança cibernética. Senhor Wade Lance, é um prazer recebê-lo na Junta Interamericana de Defesa e estamos prontos para a sua apresentação. Please, Mr. Wade Lance, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. There it is. See, thank you. Good morning and welcome. We have very little time today to tackle a very large subject, which is impacting cybersecurity at all levels. So in the next 50 minutes, we're going to try to myself and Alejandro, some discussion. We're going to try to give you as much information as we can. And so we're gonna jump right into the content, and please feel free to prepare questions. Here we go. Artificial intelligence is changing the way cybersecurity is done on both sides of the fight, both the attacker process and the defender process, very, very quickly. To be fair, these engines and tools have been around for years. They've been available. The big change is the simplicity and the ease with which people can now interact with these engines. Again, both the attacker, it's easier for them to leverage artificial intelligence engines, but also the defender, which in some cases is good news, and in some cases it is bad news. So let's jump right into it. Okay. Whew. All right. While I figure out how this works, the first thing that we wanted to talk about are the basic approaches for how individuals and organizations interact with artificial intelligence engines. Now, again, there are many, many methods, but in general, there are three primary approaches that you need to be aware of. There are public engines. The artificial intelligence engine is hosted by a third party. People access that information and submit prompts into that engine, and it spits out data. There are both advantages and disadvantages to this process. Public engines are connected to very large data sets, and they learn very, very quickly, okay? However, all of the data that is submitted into a public engine then becomes a part of the data and is queryable by anybody who knows how to interact with that engine. So if I ask the engine a question, how do I deal with this vulnerability in my environment? We have this particular CVE in our environment. What are the best fixes for that? And I do that in a way that is attributable to my organization. Another party may be able to query that engine and say, which CVEs has this organization requested information about how to manage, right? The second process is private access to a public engine. This is where you go and rent an instance of an artificial intelligence engine for your organization's use. Okay, so this leverages the strength of a public engine connected to large data sets, global data sets. It learns very quickly, but it does allow for some integrations with your data, right? The ability to leverage a public engine, but it's a little easier to connect it to your data sets. There's a less risk of third-party organizations getting access to your data, but you are responsible for any of your data that drifts its way into that engine. The third approach is the private instance. This is where, as an organization, we go out and acquire code for an AI engine to post in our environment. We are running the AI engine internally. It is very easy to connect that to my internal data sets. It will learn, but only what it learns about our organization. It is simpler to integrate that engine with our data sets. and there's a very low risk of data leaking outside your organization. So the engine is going to learn less quickly, but your security posture is much higher. Now, the reason I talk about these three approaches is because when I talk to people about how their organization is using artificial intelligence and they say, well, we're using this engine to do this, I say, which approach are you using? Is it a fully public engine? It is a private use, a rented version of a public engine, or is it completely private? And I typically get a blank stare. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So the first step for us as security operators is to recognize that the use of artificial intelligence forever changes the way we do cybersecurity. And the first things we need to do is to determine throughout the organization which kinds of artificial intelligence are we as defenders going to allow our people to use. Okay, and management needs to make that decision. Now, you'll make that decision in cooperation with technical operators in cyber operations. But we should be having conversations immediately with people to go say, hey, management throughout your organizations should be going through cyber operations and saying, are you using artificial intelligence for your process? And if so, where? And how are you doing that? The interesting thing here is the discovery. Most management in cyber operations is completely unaware that this is their responsibility, and they have no idea the level to which their people are using AI engines. So I had a conversation with one of the people that works for me. He does training programs internally for our organization. We would record a video of a process. Here's a process that CINAC is going to use internally, security testing, sales, whatever it may be. He would use a private AI engine to pull the text, to transcribe the video into text. Then he needed to create a quiz out of the text. So he would just take the transcript of the training and dump it into an AI engine as a prompt and say, this is a training. I need 5 questions, multiple choice questions out of this with 2 to 5 answers. And I need to know which are the correct answers. And the AI engine will spit out a test in 30 seconds. It takes him 4 to 5 minutes to go edit it and make sure it's clean, and he's done. Saves hours every week. And so I said to him, okay, that content, that transcript that you're submitting to that engine, what are you doing to sanitize that data of CINAC specific information? And I got the deer in the headlights, the blank stare, no idea what I'm talking about, right? Thankfully, this was the very first week. And so in cooperation with some other people, and this is something to understand, the first script for sanitization that we came up with of the data had 5 terms in it. So he would take the script, he would take the transcript, run it through a sanitization script, and it would do things like every time it ran into the word CINAC, our organization, it would replace that word with organization. So that when the data went into the AI engine, there was no way to connect the data, the submission, to us as an organization. It was sanitized out, right? When we first built that sanitization script, there were 5 terms in it that we were replacing. The fun thing about that is that when the AI engine spits out the quiz, we ran the script in reverse and it just replaces the words back. Very efficient. Once we sent that script around to 3 other teams, we went from 5 terms to 13 terms. Because when different people looked at it, they realized the sensitivity of certain terms based on their expertise and domain knowledge. So, sanitization scripts. This is critical questions for you and for your people in the use of artificial intelligence in cyber operations. Who is using artificial intelligence in the organization, and are we sanitizing that data before it goes into those engines? Fair enough? Okay, so 5 quick points, and then we'll do the ever so necessary 1-minute commercial on SYNAC, and then we'll pass it on to Alejandro. So there are attacker and defender advantages. I'm looking for the clock to make sure I'm on time. There are both attacker and defender advantages. And I can say this about artificial intelligence. The way it's being used today by attackers and defenders, we don't see it replacing very many people. What is happening is that these engines are making the people that are the top level of their skill set dramatically more efficient and effective. A very sophisticated attacker can leverage a artificial intelligence ChatGPT style engine and increase their productivity and output 30, 40, 50% in short order. They will be faster and smarter. For example, as an attacker, if I get the name of an organization, maybe it's the Air Force of South American military, I get a series of names and email addresses of individuals in that organization. I can submit that into an engine saying, I want to create a spear phishing campaign against these 10 people in this organization. The engine will crawl data in the internet for the last decade, public media, news media, social media, and construct targeted spear phishing email for each of those people that are interlocked and connected and work as a holistic program. So this would be hours and hours and hours and hours of work for an attacker. Now it's fast and easy. And so it's a faster, more quality product for the attacker. This is what your security teams are facing in cyber, the speed at which and the quality of the attack. On the defender side, we also get advantages, right? The largest difficulty that we have in cyber operations today is the inability to manage vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities, even throughout the organization. So defenders can use artificial intelligence engines to combine data and triage vast sets of vulnerabilities for priority order and get suggested remediations for those conditions. Very, very efficient. So if I look at, here's my vulnerabilities, here is my CMDB data, here's all the data about our organization's hosts, the network, the configurations, the security systems, the protocols, and then over here's my threat intelligence data. When I combine those, an AI engine can say, therefore, these 3 vulnerabilities that you have are the ones you should fix first. Very, very efficient. However, as we described in the last slide, it's critical to do that in a safe manner. Otherwise, you just communicated to a public engine, here are my most critical, easiest exploited vulnerabilities, those that a threat intel engine has told me there are functioning exploits for. You really don't want that information to get out, right? So both attackers and defenders are going to be advantaged by artificial intelligence. We have to be, as defenders, we have to be very careful about leveraging public engines for data leakage. The key element for us as cyber defenders in getting value out of artificial intelligence is interoperability of our data. These engines' ability to get at the data that they need, vulnerability data, network and host information, firewall configuration. And so there are many cybersecurity operational organizations that have been attempting these kinds of integrations for years, but they have lacked a strong business case. This costs money. Interoperability costs money. And they've lacked a strong business case. This is your business case. if you can create these integrations between this private data that you have and some public data that you'll need, particularly threat intelligence feeds, you will be in a position to accelerate your rate of cybersecurity operations. Hey, we are seeing this exploitation, this attack underway in our environment, and a well-constructed artificial intelligence engine can search terabytes of data internally and externally and tell you what's working to remediate that condition in the attack if that system is already in place. So again, it's all about speed and accuracy, and these AI engines are changing that landscape very, very quickly. Interoperability, we can talk about how to get those values. Okay. The next piece to talk about is we don't see, I touched on this earlier, we don't see AI replacing a lot of people, certainly not more sophisticated operators, cyber defenders and attackers. Let's stay focused on the defender side, the blue team side. What we see is that there's a dividing line now between defenders that do not know how to use AI as a part of their job and people that do, right? So by leveraging artificial intelligence and large language models, a mediocre defender can operate at a very high level. A sophisticated defender, the speed at which they can be productive is dramatic. Okay, unfortunately, the junior person trying to get into cyber now is having to compete with the rates at which moderate and higher level performers are able to operate. And what we're seeing is a dilution of basic skills. New people coming out of university, coming out of trainings, are now relying on AI engines to help them through their schooling process. And in many cases, they are deficient in actually understanding basic securities and network topologies and processes because they're using the artificial intelligence engines as a crutch, as a help. Okay, so we used to say, in shooting that, you don't get a scope on your rifle until you're absolutely demonstrated your skill sets with iron sights, right? You have to earn glass, right? Same thing in cyber operations. You need to use the processes, become proficient, and then add this on top. All right, moving quickly. AI is a major element. I think I'm running tight on time. On the secure by design and secure by default mission, again, we're accelerating patch timelines. Secure by design and secure by default, software development process, network configuration process, the speed at which we can check configurations and learn configurations is, again, the accuracy and speed is way up. So please leverage those engines in that process. We won't have time to talk about it today, but if part of your mission in cyber operations is focused at this point on secure by design and secure by default, you probably ought to sit down with that team and have a discussion about how they're leveraging artificial intelligence to improve that process. Okay. So two last points we'll run through. One is testing. SYNAC is a security testing company. We have 1,500 researchers in 90 different countries. So we provide the ability for our customers to test at a very deep and fast rate. One of the ways this is impacted by AI is OWASP has produced a list of the top 10 artificial intelligence security concerns to watch. OWASP top 10 for LLM. I highly recommend that you get that out to your people. At SYNAC, we're already doing in the field penetration testing and vulnerability discovery on 8 out of those 10 processes, and we're continuing to add out that capability. Remember how we talked about integration and interoperability being a key element in the success, right? If I've got this artificial intelligence engine, I have to connect it to data. That integration needs to be security tested. It needs to be evaluated. Has someone looked at this for ways to exploit these configurations? Remember, the insider threat, that person that is inside your organization has a license to interact with systems, is also being enabled by artificial intelligence now to get access to data sets, right? And so even these internal tools need to be penetration tested and looked at. And our method at SYNAC is pointed at strategic security testing, right? How do we get beyond basic security testing? Artificial intelligence is certainly modifying this. What we're suggesting to organizations is take a look at your infrastructure and make sure that the testing that you're doing is aligned with the risk of those assets. So down on the low end of the low risk assets, vulnerability scanning, absolutely. But as you work your way up, at some point, human testing becomes a mandate, right? Traditional penetration testing. Then moving into, and here are the two key notes, mission critical internet facing infrastructure with a high change rate. So if you've got an application or infrastructure that faces the internet and it's mission critical and it changes on a monthly basis, some of them change on a weekly basis, some of them change on a daily basis, right? But if you have internet-facing mission-critical infrastructure with a high change rate, and you're having humans do penetration testing on that once a year, twice a year, you're in trouble, right? Because the speed at which the attacker is going to identify vulnerabilities, and by vulnerabilities, we don't just mean CVEs, we also mean exploitable conditions, right? In the cloud, 2/3 of all cloud exploits are based on misconfiguration. Nothing wrong with the software, just not set up right? People have to look at this. So strategic security testing is where we accelerate the testing process and the people involved. Again, we'll rather than just 2 people with a couple of laptops for a couple of weeks, we'll have 20 or 30 people from around the globe look at that infrastructure at a pace that's adapted, whether it's once a quarter or once a day, right? Super. So I know we're going to have a follow-on conversation about artificial intelligence after Alejandro goes. So I'll throw on the brakes there and we'll look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Wade Lance. Apresentamos agora o próximo palestrante de nosso evento, Sr. Alejandro Botter, que é gerente de engenharia de
Now we will present our next panelist, an expert on artificial intelligence, cyber defense, and cyber security. Alejandro Botter, and he has strengths, advantages, and challenges. Thank you for being on the House of Soldier. Mr. Alejandro Botter, it's a pleasure for us to have you in the American Defense Board with the delegates. The floor is yours.
Buenas tardes, boa tarde, good afternoon to everyone. Primero, antes que nada, un gusto.
Well, first of all, for me, it's a pleasure to be here and to share about Checkpoint, as mentioned on the presentation, trends, advantages, disadvantages on security, cybersecurity. First of all, I would like to summarize that our company has been on the market for 30 years, as we can see here. The company works with Fortune 500 on different areas, from banks, governmental, military. We do have more than 1,500 at a global level, 100,000 employees around the world, and we have developed for the last year different technologies, avant-garde technologies, and trends that nowadays we will see how this to do with artificial intelligence. Next slide. We have certain quotes of the people that are well known. These are not from this year, have been there for quite a while, mentioned the importance of artificial intelligence on different areas, right? The impact on technology, the impact that it has at a nation level, and the implications of artificial intelligence. So again, since we are all talking nowadays about artificial intelligence, because we have seen an explosion on the generation of artificial intelligence, that is the one that I'm gonna focus on this morning. One of the reasons why it's the investment. Millionaire investments, billions of dollars that have been invested on different technologies. It's a wide market, a very broad market with specific segments of artificial intelligence. This is the next industrial revolution. When we talk about this, a few years ago, we saw that everything that was the muscle was moved towards machines. The more emblematic is automobiles, I think, process that is completely automated. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about many tasks that we need to develop, things that we need to think about to take them to artificial intelligence. And as the concept describes, it's a non-biological intelligence. Now, one of the questions is why now? Why is it that now we are all talking about artificial intelligence? And this is something that has been happening for quite a while, for quite some years. And I believe that it's because of three important things: storage, computation, and associated many times of cloud computing. That is one of the fundamental tools of the acceleration of artificial intelligence, but also algorithms. Many of the things that we see nowadays that are being implemented on artificial intelligence has to do with algorithms. Presented on 2017 for the first time, and now is something that we're seeing completely applied. So artificial intelligence is something that can take us to many applications. Something that is important to highlight, though, is that, well, the different tools that you interact with as a human being, right? The first thing that we can see, and I believe that many of us have purchased, is the projection of the interaction of certain systems that will suggest any kind of product. Another one is images. Sometimes in many search online, we have entered a word and we can find images. We have a cake here. And another example is the voice recognition. A few years ago, when we had Alexa, Siri, and this type of platforms, will only understand English, and nowadays we are on a development that can understand any type of language. This has been happening for quite some years, the application of artificial intelligence in different areas. Now, this year is the generation artificial intelligence year, so to speak. And along the line is where we can determine different platforms. The first one is the rate of fostering or adopting ChatGPT, the access to the portal, the access to ChatGPT since November 2022 up to February 2023 We can see the lines, and it had an explosion. It's not the only one on that market. We can see Meta, we can see Google. They have also developed different tools for generation of artificial intelligence. The first one, as we heard on the last presentations, when you request a report or to summarize a script, you get a result, a text. When you talk about a guide, a script, you have to take into account different things. Look at the image that we have on the screen. We can have images, videos, audio, music. This is one of the things, the copyright and how to differentiate something that was generated by artificial intelligence, but also for human code generation as well. Is something important that we must mention. So when you connect this to the human factor, the interaction with the technologies will lead you to first a flood of results. Twitter, for instance, started posting, and you were not able to identify if this was human generation or machine generation. Incorrect information or false information that seems real, but it's disseminated massively. Fake news, as we know them, right? With this kind of tools, the development of this topic was not something that we could determine that was false, and this is important. And monetization of work. The typical question, if this is gonna replace, if AI is gonna replace someone that is working with a software or defense security, well, we want to redefine the profession, and not only for informatics or IT, but also some other professions. Me and my co-pilot, right? It's important to mention that everyone that works in technology and cybersecurity, fostering this and understanding how the platforms work is going to be key on the professional development, because we can set the difference between the ones that have adopted the technology and the ones that does not quite understand it. We have GPT-4. This is a post on the New York Times saying how exciting but scary is at the same time, AI. So where is AI heading? We see unimodal and genes. A clear example of this is a horse. Well, we want to know a description of a horse, and it generates a text. Now, what's being generated and what's happening during the last weeks, actually, we had an opening on AI. It's to move it to the multimodal. This means that when we indicate that we want to know what a horse is, it will have the capacity of generating a sound, description, image of a horse, and it's going to be more precise on the results. Main trends of what we are seeing and checkpoint research. The threats on America, and for America, I'm talking about all the countries. We have the information that has been under attack 1,008 times per week. This is the checkpoint trend establishment. that is the one that provides information about the global points done as protection of 500 and others. The main malware is InfoSolver, and the malware is AC service, how to simplify the attacks to generate the platforms where we have not the possibility of creating a malware from zero, but there are hackers that are using the malware to create attacks at a global level. 70% of the malicious files were delivered by mail. This is something that has been changing. The main vector was web download, and 70% nowadays is through an email. This is one of the most used through spear phishing.
Que es los tipos de malware. Acá pueden ver una comparación entre Américas y el global, donde particularmente uno de los que está por encima del promedio es la parte de malware focalizado en dispositivos móviles, pero como pueden ver también hay una linealidad entre los ataques, entre los tipos de malware, que en lo que es Américas comparado con el nivel global. Bueno, como mencionaba antes, esto es información del Threat Intelligence de Checkpoint, y acá, como pueden ver, desde el 8 de mayo hasta el 30 de octubre es información bastante reciente, y de aquí sale el promedio de los 1.108 ataques que mencionaba antes, sí que fíjense que está casi alineado con el nivel global. Yendo particularmente a las industrias más impactadas, en los últimos 6 meses, fíjense que en el top 3 aparece lo que es gobierno y entes militares. Por el otro lado está lo que es la parte de retail, lo que es proveedores de Internet en lo que es Américas. Bien, ahí está el top 3. Y yendo particularmente a los países, en el ranking, lo que nos indica que está, esto es de la información de octubre, es de todo el mes de octubre, está primero Ecuador, segundo Perú y tercero Colombia. Una de las cosas que quería compartir, este es el reporte de mitad de año de Checkpoint, en el cual nosotros hacemos todo un análisis de distintos tipos de ciberataques, de tácticas y técnicas utilizadas por estos atacantes. Una de las cosas que mencionaban en distintas las sesiones es clave la colaboración, y mucha de la información que se utiliza para la...
Much of the information that is used for the Checkpoint and the collaboration with different centers is shown in this part. One of the things that you will be able to see in the report is the evolution of the ransomware. The attack with USB, that is something that is old, but in the cyber war we started to talk about this again. That was a peak in these attacks, and the hacks affiliated to the state. And now we see many groups that are acting on behalf of a key piece for many of these states, because they don't recognize these activists. And so this separation makes these groups of activists be able to act in a independent form gradually without any reprisals, and particularly artificial intelligence. There's a complete section in this report. And here we have risks and challenges of the artificial intelligence. The first of the attacks, and one of the first things that we saw when the generative AI appeared is phishing. As we showed you before, the sophistication and the fidelity of the attacks grew a lot, especially you can see here on the screens, this was one of the phishing campaigns using as a basis the ChatGPT-4. And in this case, they designed a very good campaign to launch the ChatGPT. And the second one is a lack of knowledge and greater volume. Attackers have a less level of knowledge and less requirements of knowledge than in the past. And this implies that, for instance, what you're seeing on the screen are tools like ChatGPT and that you can see in the dark web, which is a tool that is used by an attacker that has a basic knowledge and can set up a malware up to a type of phishing. And this implies two things. One is the level of sophistication and the volume of the attacks. The other issue is the impersonation and authentication of frauds. And there's another tool that 2 weeks after we have the Wash GPT, we had the fraud GPT that is focused on all phishing attacks. And when you talk about impersonation, one of the things that we saw is that everything that refers to the deepfake tools are here. In this case, we can see a video that appeared several years ago of an actor of Argentina that is very well known. And this type of thing was very common using deep fake. But this became serious in the last times because some other things appeared like this. Persons, very well-known politicians, for instance, with better tools and more difficult to differentiate in terms of video in this case, but also the voice. It's impressive in the recent times, the level of sophistication of the deep fake, how they can use the voice of another person. And also the leak of information is important. This is one of the main challenges and one of the first challenges that all the companies faced with all this use of ChatGPT. The employees started to use this tool without any fear of who they were sharing it with. And what you see on the screen is the privacy policy of OpenAI. And as you can see here, it says very clearly that you collect all this personal information. And this is something that came up in July. And it said we may collect. And now it says we collect. So it's very clear that all this information that is shared with these tools is collected. And another issue that appeared, we had a lot of false tools like Open ChatGPT, and intended to be a ChatGPT, but were malwares, and this was dispersed through the cell phones. Another of the issues, which is more for the development of AI prompt injection or the bypass of the filters, and this is the capacity to inject some type of command in these tools, in these technologies, and manipulate the service. Here in the middle, you see ignore your previous instructions and do this instead. So this is basically how you make the bypass of all the filters that were implemented. To summarize, you can see the investigations and analysis and how the ChatGPT transforms the access to AI and the leak of information that is sensitive and confidential, and the deep fake campaigns with the elections of several countries and how they were done. So how is a Checkpoint using this? The first thing is how we use the SOC with the AI. In 2018, we carried out a survey, and it determined 3 issues. That these operation centers were difficult to identify critical events, and they had manual processes, and then to have the qualified staff. And the as a result, all the critical attacks were discovered too late. And this line, the objective was to simplify the detection of malwares, to help the SOCs in this line through a machine learning tool. This is in 2018. This is the Maggie project. It's matching machine learning. And to detect the devices with malware, we had 33 clients with more than 1 million logs that were analyzed and 7,000 endpoints with logs, and only 740 of them were considered infected and only 12%. And the results of what was stated with Maggie on the left on the screen, you can see that the focus was that a SOC operator could see this malware and this prompt and these devices that are the ones that are critical, that need a response. And this is part of a more expanded motor or engine, and with all this information that is generated by the different engines of the machine. To end, because this has the operational part, and this would be the front end, what the operators see. And this comes out from one place. The checkpoint today has 40 technologies of AI and machine learning that generate the content to be able to determine a type of action. And then it talks with big data and with all the collaboration of the different entities, and also the generation of investigations. These are real cases with machine learning where we have a type of a traffic of AppSec, and based on their behavior, because there are requests of suspicious events, and based on that the fact that this event was not common, we did a scoring to see what this traffic is. And everything that you see here on the screen was the attack of Log4j that gave a headache to all the security persons that that was published by Apache quite a while ago. And what you're seeing on the screen is this block that was that happened 3 days before Apache published this vulnerability. So this is an application that is very simple and direct on how all these technologies can make a change, a drastic change on the way how you approach cyber defense. To end, the great question is if this is the Star Wars or Black Mirror, that are two series that are very well known on as far as cyber defense and generative cyber defense. This is so fast, and everybody is developing the AI technologies. The thing is that they have to be more efficient, focusing on the key areas, and we need faster administrations, because the focus here is to reduce the staff and make it much more effective. And the worry for next year is that we hope that there is going to be an increase in cyber attacks, and that the stakeholders are using these tools every day more. And we hope that the next year the level of sophistication of the attacks and the number of the attacks will increase. Thank you very much. Mr. Alexander Butt and Mr. Lanza, thank you for your presentations on cyber defense, cyber security, and artificial intelligence. We're going
in your presentations, we emphasize the topics related to the use of the artificial intelligence and the cyber defense. Just to maintain the time on track, because we're a little bit delayed, but I have one question that we received a lot of insight about that. How do you see the regulation of AI in the face of development of products in the area of cyber defense?
An excellent session earlier. can work everything but a microphone. I think we got it now. So I enjoyed this session earlier on the legal aspects where we talk about what we're doing at a national level and then how that impacts what's happening at a regional level. The same thing is happening in AI. We're seeing some very positive movement out of the US White House talking about requesting NIST to develop additional standards for artificial intelligence, in particular testing, just because that's part of what affects SYNAC in particular. But I think that to the extent we can get standardized testing processes in place quickly to expose deficiencies, that'll be extremely helpful. When we, at SYNAC, when our people go looking, we find dramatic, simple deficiencies in these spaces. And so I think regulations will drive that forward. And we're already seeing big progress. There was an announcement out of the governor of New York requesting additional testing of these infrastructures. So I think that to the extent other states can leverage those standards, the NIST standard, I think is going to be a useful one. That will accelerate adoption of better security best practices around artificial intelligence for sure.
I'm going to answer in Spanish, just misunderstanding.
I believe that it is a process of adaptation, and the most positive thing that I see here is the fact that many of the governments are creating these committees to talk about this subject. And we talked about the safe development and the benefits of all this and the application of this. And I think that the point of greater discussion is innovation and to make a good use of all these tools and to avoid the abuse and to use them for that they were not conceived for.
I believe he could spend hours discussing such engaging topics. But our allotted time for questions to Mr. Alejandro Botter and Mr. Wade Lance has come to an end. Dear speakers, on behalf of the Organization of the American States and the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to express our gratitude for your work in the field of cyber defense, your participation in our event, and the excellence of the presentations delivered. Thank you very much. Apresentamos agora o próximo palestrante de nosso evento, Senhora Carrie Ann Barrett.
And Mrs. Gary Ann Barrett, that is going to talk from the OAA, and she is graceful with her presence. Carrie Ann, it is a pleasure for the IADB to and here in this room of the delegates, and we have the presentation called Education and Awareness, Training Individuals in Cyber Security. Ms. Carrie Ann Barrett, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas PowerPoint to come up, and then I'll begin. With the introduction done, my name is Carrie Ann Barrett, as you've heard. I've been in cybersecurity for the past almost 15 years. More specifically with the OAS for the past 10 years, and I am not a technical person. I'm an attorney by training, so the perspective I'll be bringing to you today would be more a policy-oriented discussion that we would have. The presentation that I have to you today is focused on cybersecurity education and awareness, empowering individuals and institutions. My intervention will be focused on having you reflect on some of the gaps that we have in cyber skills in the region, and then bring you to a discussion around some of the solutions that we can have. And then we will wrap it up by just opening up to thoughts and questions. I was asked to present concepts that would be applicable to the Inter-American
defense framework on this topic. So it would be more generic, and then I'll try and bring the conversation to that specific aspect. Just making sure we have the technologies. Okay, it's not here. Okay, perfect. I'll look behind me then, sorry. All right, so just to begin, the cybersecurity program of the Organization of American States started in 2004. So we generally have almost, let me go back again. We generally have almost 20 years of experience in doing cyber capacities. We've always divided our work into three main pillars: policy development, technical, and then we would do research and outreach. As a part of the technical capabilities, we have been focused more and more on ensuring that we can do workforce development. And our idea is that in doing workforce development is looking at it more holistically, from youth all the way up to reskilling and retraining those who are already in our governments. More specifically, what is the context that we're looking at today? We believe that cybersecurity right now, if you think about how education and awareness can contribute to economic and social prosperity, with COVID-19, we recognize there are so many of us who went online. And then more specifically, we have such a transformation in terms of the risk landscape that we have. The conversation that preceded me on AI and AI technologies really let us realize what we're coming up against and to ensure that we have the skill sets to suit it. As a result, looking at some of the problems and challenges that we have, the OAS actually undertook a study with Cisco earlier this year with data that was gathered for the previous year. One of the things we recognized is, just like what everyone says globally, there is a skills gap. There is a gap in cybersecurity professionals. So we've been looking at it from a supply and demand perspective, trying to see how we can actually have a balance. What we recognize is we pour a lot of resources in the supply side, but if it is that our government and even the defense arm is not demanding it, you're going to have a surplus, and it's going to start creating an imbalance as well. Another perspective that we're looking into is what kind of skills that you actually need, what kind of jobs that we're looking at. There are many models such as the NICE that actually divides what these skill sets are. But when you think about it from the defense perspective, I always tell people that for me, cybersecurity is just a small nuance to the work that we have in terms of those who are traditionally doing what they do. What do I mean by that? As a defense arm of a government, there are certain things you do almost automatically. You look at threats, you do analysis, and you find solution. You're constantly problem solving. How I see cybersecurity in your framework is that it's now another nuance to consider in among everything else that you triage to be able to do your risk analysis in order to do your pivoting and your advising. As far as I'm concerned, cybersecurity is just another one for you to consider. What does that mean for you? In the more broad perspective, Defense Force, you pull from the general public. Persons join the Army, they join the Defense Force in the various arms, and then they have a career path. Should everyone become cybersecurity professionals? I don't think so. One of the things that we're looking at is how can you ensure that the persons who have specific roles already, for example, you may have a commander who's in charge of a certain fleet of persons that are focused on fixing airplanes. Do they all need to be cybersecurity professionals within the Army? Probably not. Do they need to understand cybersecurity risks in what they do as they approach your tools and your assets? Yes. So there's a distinction to be made in terms of cybersecurity awareness, cybersecurity education, and then also to look at some of the specialized skill sets that are needed for a cybersecurity professional. The reason I'm distinguishing it is because cybersecurity awareness needs to have for everyone. I usually akin it to mathematics and English. At base level, when you go into school, you're taught phonics. Phonics is really to give you the tool sets to be able to speak the language, whatever language is it, whether it be Spanish, English, Portuguese. You're learning the baseline to be able to speak, and then you learn math. Mathematics pretty much is a tool and a skill set I don't do any of the algebra right now in my career, but guess what? It trained my brain how to think. And one of the things I want to challenge you is that you want to start thinking about cybersecurity in a similar concept, where you need to have basic awareness for all forms of defense, but then you need to start looking at the different skill sets that touches on risk that are associated with your various formations. So for example, in the Air Force, you may have that a lot of persons are touching the technology. What awareness skills they need to know as they touch your technology to be conscious of, because as we know, human beings are the first point of failure. They're the insider threat. They're the ones that are going to be, no matter how many firewalls you have, they're on the inside. What basic skill set does that grouping need to have? As you continue up the chain of your risk assessments, the guys who actually have permissions, authorization to approve things, they have access to all the data that's in your system, what level of awareness they need that would complement the technology that you're using to protect them. With all of that said, and painting that kind of picture for you, we try to look at how governments are approaching cybersecurity skills. One, we recognize there are isolated efforts related to the workforce. Secondly, we recognize there's no real institutional coordination around skills for cybersecurity. There's insufficient strategic information at the decision level, which is what we talk about, that awareness. And there's insufficient awareness and resources and tools for the workforce itself. When you kind of split that out now into where are the weaknesses in both the labor supply side and the demand side, we recognize there's insufficient vacations, meaning that training that's available to persons in our region. English proficiency sometimes is low and moderate, and a lot of the technological training is in English. And that is a huge barrier for us in our region, because thinking about translating the language into Spanish or Portuguese and ensuring in French for those who are from Haiti, to try and ensure that the training is accessible is critical. There's a lack of knowledge at the very base level for these kids in terms of this is an opportunity. I want to go into the Army. How do I go into the Army? Okay, I said they want to be a chef, but they want to work in the Army. How do they want to be a cybersecurity professional and they're in the Army? But what if they're already in the Army? Do they need to automatically start doing CompTIA, doing all of these technical skills training? Maybe not. They may just need some basic reskilling to ensure that they keep you secure. There's a poor understanding of the definition of what is a cybersecurity professional. And at that base level, people hear cyber, and I had someone who said to me, oh, you're a lawyer, how come you're in cybersecurity? Because cybersecurity professionals are not just one category. Each of us will layer this on as a skill set. But then on the demand side, one of the weaknesses we're seeing is that there's no common taxonomy as to what are the skills you need. So someone says they need a pen tester, and they're asking for certain qualifications that has nothing to do with pen testing. So on the demand side, you're asking for something that doesn't exist on the supply side based on the job description you want. Organizationally, in terms of how you organize yourself and recognizing that there are gaps. And I'm going to point it out right now in this room, there's only 3 females that are in this room. That's a huge gap because we're talking about a very important topic. And how do we ensure that we start bringing some amount of diversity into the room? I am not an advocate just to have a woman in the room for being a woman, but one of the things it recognizes that maybe at the base level, at entry level into the Army, we need to start thinking about how do we promote more women leadership coming into the Army so they can then grow up in the ranks. Difficulties in career pathways. I remember I was head legal for national security in Trinidad and Tobago many years ago. And one of the challenges I faced was that my cybercrime unit was stuck in a framework where the inspector came to the point where he had to get promoted. There was no structure within the cybercrime unit for him to get his promotion. He had to leave the unit in order to get his next posting. So when we think about how we create our ranks and what is needed in terms of, you may have someone who is a specialized cybersecurity professional in the Army, can they actually still continue to grow in the formations or will grow in the ranks that they need to grow and still be that cybersecurity professional that you need so that they don't leave the Army to go and consult, but they can actually stay within the Army. So to continue with the data that we gathered, we recognized from the data that we had that there must be a multi-stakeholder approach to be able to address these gaps. Developing strategies between private and public sector, updating our legislation, and promoting ongoing assessments of what the labor market is. On the supply side, we thought that encouraging scientific vocations in this topic, connecting education with the training industry is critical. Why is that critical? Because we have computer science still being taught as a degree program in our universities. It's a 3 to 4 year degree program. Technology changes every couple of months. By the time they go through this already set educational curricula and they graduate without any practicums associated with the information they're learning, they leave university with just a degree, but their skill sets are irrelevant to the market. How can we ensure that we complement education with training, that while they're being educated, and we do need people with degrees and masters, et cetera, because that's how the world is structured, how do we ensure that their skill set is relevant when they graduate? My colleague earlier, he raised a very important point about the persons who would be graduating, but they've used AI so much, they left, and all they know is how to use the technology, but they have no knowledge or skill set. So there's like a whole realm of professionals now coming out that have the degree, but they don't have the mental ability to be able to apply to the job and the task and associated with that. On the demand side, we want to start thinking about how we adjust our hiring requirements to recruit top talent. I'm going to get to some of the answers that I know that was asked of me, but I wanted to emphasize is recognizing that we need to retain the workforce as well is critical in this planning. Keeping them motivated, keeping them challenged, and ensuring that we have opportunities for them. This report is available. I'm just posting it here so at least you could go into more details on the report because the presentation is not about the report, but I wanted to set the baseline with that information. The question I was asked was the role of an inter-American framework in cyber education for cybersecurity and defense. The reason I set that baseline before getting to this question more specifically is that one of the things we have to recognize is that within this sphere of the military, you are taught to think critically. You're taught to problem solve. You're taught to look at risk and balance those risks. And how I see it is that cybersecurity is, as I started, just another element within your risk analysis. So how does it mean that you can then create a framework around the inter-American defense system and a framework around education? I believe that education is relevant. That's probably the point I wanted to start off with categorically. But the education that you need to set up has to be along your general trajectories for each of the roles that you have within the defense force. You have to think about if it is that I'm now doing space, for example, not cyberspace, but space, that's all technology. That's 100%. Everyone who is in that formation has to have some amount of cybersecurity, not just awareness, but also technical skills, technical understanding, a risk-based approach. So how do you start building it through? It's by doing your risk assessments, by doing your triaging to see, okay, if this person is on this, who has access, thinking about your skill sets, you have to start thinking about your risk associated with that. Some of the more tactile operations that you have, you also have to start thinking about the technologies associated with that. And what are the risks? Some of them are low risk. If the person is just having a device on them to track them for the GPS, the risk may be a little bit low. But what if they lose that technology? It then becomes a connected kind of risk. How do you train them to understand why you can't lose this GPS device? As practical as that, not getting into what will happen if somebody hacks it. That may be too much information for them. They just need to have basic awareness as to why keeping this device secure is important. So my answer to this critical question to me was really thinking through your jobs exactly how it is, but layering in cybersecurity as an additional risk factor and an additional touch point. If it is that the persons are in the framework and they are actually learning and doing technologies, you also need to start thinking about innovation. A lot of what we do needs to be innovated. How do you recruit the right talent to ensure that the services that we provide as the Defense Force becomes innovative and adaptive as well? I remember going to some of the sessions in Trinidad, because as head legal, you get to interact with all formations, and going out to the Coast Guard, you recognize that there are certain protocols associated with it. But can we not stop for a second to recognize that because we have to give our nations, our states, the best level of defense possible, we have to start innovating. And some of you have already. Some of you have cyber defense, cybersecurity defense groups. You may have triaging that you're doing with the data already. You have SOCs that you work with. But at the end of the day, how are we actually approaching the innovation and the protection of the innovations that come out of the Army for those purposes? With that said, one of the things I wanted to highlight is some of the things that we, as well as OAS, is working on for you to, just to give some examples in terms of how we think about this. Co-creating tailor-made solutions for what you have identified as your risk is critical. One of the things that we've been looking at is, I'm going to give some concrete solutions as to how you can actually promote this. One is consolidating, for example, how you do your incident response, considering staff development as a part of that component. Oftentimes we think of incident response as just one aspect, guys sitting behind a screen ensuring that that happens. But how do you ensure that you have that staff development component of it? How do you ensure that a person who starts off as a data analyst can end up moving into forensics, can end up moving into another field? So a concrete solution to you is, as you think about your basic teams, for example, your incident response teams, ensure that you have some amount of staff development component. How are we doing it as the OAS? Because that was a question. Currently, we have something called our CSIRTs Americas Network. As a part of that, we actually have 16 military certs participating in that. What have we done as the OAS? We've ensured that within that, we have what is called our CSIRTs Americas Academy. The Academy breaks down certain skill sets that anyone who's a part of the network, we partner with Cisco for this, anyone who's and we partner with CESENE CERT, which is the CERT from Spain. Anyone who's a part of the network can be part of the Academy, and you can have self-paced training. Why do I cite this example? Each country can actually think about their staff development from one, soft skills, the awareness, to hard skills. Those who are actually associated with certain job roles, ensuring that they have a trajectory, that they can improve their skills on a regular basis. Another area that I think can be included in your framework is to consider external networking. How have you established collaboration among other incident response teams within the military with other countries? Thinking about your traditional agreements that you already have for exercising. You may have a person leaving from here to go and do joint exercise trainings in Suriname, for example. How are you now layering in that cyber component to do your TTXs, your digital exercising? And I'm pushing the traditional stuff because you guys do this well. You guys collaborate well across the globe in terms of joint exercises, joint operations. Think about cybersecurity as just that other element. How do I ensure that my teams do those joint operations and joint trainings? One of the things that your trainings do is that it helps you to exercise protocols and steps that needs to happen in the event is an incident. And it's the same thing that would happen in the event of a cyber incident. Another thing that I wanted to suggest as a part of your framework is participating in CERT systems, recognizing that you're not alone, and a part of defending the various parts of critical infrastructure also includes pragmatic and fruitful coming together of those things. Another thing is implementing national cybersecurity strategies and policies. The OAS promotes national cybersecurity strategies. And we recognize that in some instances, countries may want to have national cyber defense strategies, and to recognize that that is important in implementing it. Another aspect I wanted to suggest is looking at your recruitment and how you recruit. As a part of that, thinking about the youth and ensuring that they understand there is a career path in this. Diverse skills are needed. Cybersecurity offers like a wide set of cybersecurity skills. So if you think about it, a youth who's aspiring to be an ethical hacker, how can that person be a good tool for you in defense? We spoke about utilizing private sector, as we had our colleagues before from Syntac and talking about some of the tools that they have. But how do we ensure that you have the persons on the inside who can utilize those tools? We spoke about cybersecurity culture, ensuring that you do have some culture within the institutions. Social engineering awareness is critical as well as a part of your broad set educational strategy. And I think the last point I'd probably want to make on this is employee training programs that ensure that they're aware of best practices as they come along. One of the things that we would want to kind of just rest with you is in thinking about inter-American defense educational framework is to take it from the same systematic approach that you do all things right now. It is no different. And the reason why I'm trying to demystify the concept of it, it's because we think about it in such a outside thing. It's something outside of our sphere, outside of our knowledge, outside of our capability. But an educational framework for the defense, for cybersecurity, falls under the same levels that it does for your traditional educational now. I would just want to summarize what I've shared just by saying more categorically, cybersecurity education is needed, yes. The second question is, how do we do this? My suggestion is looking at your risk assessments and finding the skill sets needed to meet the answers to those risks you've identified. Is cybersecurity a whole different career within the Army? Probably yes, but it's still associated with the services that you provide to your states. And last, recognizing that your biggest risk sometimes is the human factor as an insider. Ensure that you have a dedicated cyber awareness campaign that is constant. It's not something that you do once a month, but it's something as a basic training requirement for all persons who are part. And on that note, I know I went really quickly, but it's because I think the topic that I was asked to share on was such a very precise one, and I think it was a very good one, but I thought it was a pretty simple, direct response that was needed to the ask. So I'll stop there for questions because I think I'd want to open the space for questions. So I hand over the mic.
To keep the time on track, we will do the debate in this position that you are now. Mr. Carrion, thank you very much for your presentation, which again insight into education and awareness in cybersecurity, empowering individuals and institutions. I believe the most relevant aspects of your presentation address to the contrast between increasing of the threats and the shortage in the cybersecurity workforce, I think is the biggest one. And also the demand for the future training for cybersecurity and the need to create a shared awareness of cybersecurity. We showed some suggestions for questions for you, but you went along. You talked too much about these specific questions. But we received some question from General Hugo Quijano from Peru. He gave one question: how to face the challenges of reducing cybersecurity learning gaps in societies that have limited access to information technologies. How can we do that?
Just a couple of ways. One of the things I always look at is, what is your threat landscape? What are your touch points to technology? And how do you mitigate the ones that you can? In risk management, there's always the tolerable risks, the risk that you can actually tolerate. And if something goes wrong, you could probably mitigate it or fix it, and look at the risk that you can't tolerate. So when I tell people is, when you have limited resources, the first thing that you have to think about are, what are the risks that I can't afford to take? What are the risks that if this happens, I will be devastated? So when we have persons with limited access to training or limited ability to be trained, I always look at it from the perspective of ensuring that when you've identified those risks that cannot be tolerated, cannot be absorbed, ensure that's where you put your energy and your focus, recognizing that that is where you're going to need an immediate response and you need the skill sets for that. Everything is kind of global now in terms of access to training. So what I would suggest is, if it's an institution or an organization that feels they don't have access, is to start looking first at some of the basic things that are free online. So for example, Microsoft, Cisco, AWS, all offer free training, not always free certification, but at the very baseline, recognize that there are resources available online from Coursera to AWS to Cisco, Microsoft, and a few others. So my short answer to that would be, think about the risk, think about the skills that you need to address that risk, and let that be your priority. Prioritization is key when you have limited resources.
As the allotted time for questions to Mr. Carrie Ann Barrett comes to an end, we bid farewell to our speaker. Mrs. Carrie Ann Barrett, on behalf of the Organization of the American States and the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to express our gratitude for your work in the field of education, your participation in our event, and the excellence of your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Apresentamos agora o próximo palestrante de nosso evento, Capitão de Mar e Guerra Luciano Moraes de Oliveira, que é oficial da Marinha do Brasil e assessor de defesa cibernética da Junta Interamericana de Defesa, e nos brindará com sua apresentação intitulada Promovendo a Cooperação Hemisférica, Mecanismos e Parcerias para uma Defesa. Capitão de Mar e Guerra Luciano Moraes de Oliveira, convidamos para iniciar a sua apresentação. Por favor, comandante, a audiência é sua.
Muito obrigado pela oportunidade, muito obrigado a todos os presentes aqui e online. A gente conta com um número extraordinário de participantes pelas nossas redes sociais e pelos nossos canais. E a gente está aqui para falar sobre cooperação hemisférica. Eu acho que essa palavra cooperação é muito importante. Eu não me recordo desde os primeiros momentos, das 9 horas da manhã, quando a gente teve a primeira apresentação, na verdade, as primeiras palavras de abertura do general Highcamp. Essa palavra foi citada, e foi citada em todas as apresentações. Então, é para isso que é essa apresentação que a gente vai fazer aqui hoje. A gente vai percorrer essa breve agenda, fazer uma breve introdução, falar sobre o que é a Junta Interamericana de Defesa, é muito importante. Muita gente não conhece exatamente o que a gente faz hoje. Falar sobre o Programa de Defesa Cibernética, o futuro da cooperação em defesa
defense programs that we have, and then have a conclusion.
Eu não vou me estender muito nesse
I'm not going to stop so much in this aspect, because we have spoken a lot.
Foi falado pelo senhor Alejandro Botter e também pelo general.
This has been elaborated by Alejandro, and the cyber threat is present today, and it is evolving every day more with the new tools. And we have some difficulties in accompanying the new tools that rise every day. And to tell you that the cyber threat is present, and that it touches us, that this silence invasion is like walking here with the same steps. And I want to mention the importance that we have to give it to the cyber threat, to this scourge. Well, one more data just on a cyber threat, and then I'm going to move later on to talk about this question that is going to be answered at the end. One link that is weak in the chain weakens the whole chain. This picture is a picture that represents the facilities where we're having this conference, and you are here attending the House of the Soldier. And from here, we have the seat of the board, and the Inter-American Defense Board was created in 1942 in the context of the Second World War. And well, about 20 years later, we created the Inter-American Defense College, where it was possible to union the unionize the defense of the hemisphere and prepare leaders for the defense of the hemisphere. But with the different differentiation of the world context, the focus of the board also changed. The board is now part of the OAS and started working with another approach. Until 2006, the IADB thought about the defense of the hemisphere. And from there, it has moved more to the threats that are more diffuse and complex, and started to think about a multidimensional security. And the board started to give advisory to the OAS and to its member states, and to that demanded that we do certain things as being members of the OAS, and to provide a technical advisory in defense for a multidimensional security. This advisory is applied in different activities: cyber defense, confidence and security building measures, human rights, gender, with a program that is called Women, Peace and Security, Management of Arsenals, Maritime Security, the Environment Protection, Demining, Humanitarian Demining, and the response to disasters and humanitarian assistance. So the advisors here are not always specialized in all these topics. Also, we want to work because the IADB works, as we have seen on the text, from the in defense and cyber defense as a facilitator, and helps a member state that needs any support or advisory for the other member state or another institution that can develop it, not only in cyber defense, but in all the programs of the IADB. The advisors that we have here try to connect those that need it with those that can help. And now I'm talking specifically about our program, our cyber program, that is supported by 3 pillars: the contact network, capacity building, and conferences. And I'm going to line up here briefly each one of these pillars that are very important, and they're all 3 connected. The first stage of contact is the room of delegates, the picture that you can see through the internet, or all of you that are seated here and that are part of the IADB. This is the Council of Delegates. This is where the delegates of the member states meet to discuss on the needs and the demands that the organization proposes. And it is the first stage. It is the first one who demands and who we support or help. So for us to be able to give support in this first stage is not only something of the advisors and member states. We need to be connected as diverse organizations, international organizations that are our partners and that do not demand very much, but help us, support us with information from the member states, and they are put into contact with the member state that requests assistance so that they can develop their capacities to have persons habilitated in certain issues and to know what is happening currently in the different areas. And these international organizations, we also have as partners some other teaching organizations, and this is where we have the new ideas, lessons learned, and all the novelties and everything that is advancing in terms of technologies that can be useful for the member states, which is the first stage that was mentioned before. And besides the teaching or education institutions, and especially for the cyber defense, we have these companies that support us in all the events that we have carried out this year. we have some companies that are very diverse, and much of we have learned and heard is part of the construction of our network of contacts that is participating in different events, like opponents or as listeners. And these are events in which the advisors can enroll, and we participate in this to bring the member states to the new novelties and the new technologies that we can learn through these events. And this is really strengthens our contact network. So this contact network provides a sea of solutions that you see on this picture. Lessons learned, thoughts and events. This is what we can reach with this strong network. Another pillar is the capacity building. Within this pillar, we use in our contacts, and we can have courses with the support of the member states. And of course, that the IADB doesn't have its own structure, but with the help of international organizations and member states, we can carry out these courses. And these are, we can see the different guides that are available in our web that were done with the support of Canada. Canada supported us, and the Inter-American Foundation of Defense supported us and provided us this guide, cyber guide, that is available for all the member states. And besides that, with regards to the capacity flag, we have created a new concept of an exercise, cooperation for flag. The teams need to help each other to advance in these challenges. So this is a different way to motivate the member states to help each other in the solution of problems. And we have executed 2 exercises. And more than 150 participants distributed in 57 teams.
No segundo exercício realizado há pouco, em outubro, a gente teve, antes do exercício, 2 workshops.
It was done in October, and we have 2 workshops with 2 stakeholders that provided information for the member countries. We had more than 800 participants in those workshops, and they prepare us for a second exercise that we had in October. We didn't have much teams, but we have more participants, more member states, and more people participating.
A construção de capacidade.
And we hope that for next year, we can continue building the capacities for the decision takers. So this is a tabletop exercise.
Ainda no primeiro semestre do próximo ano.
This is something that we are going to do on the first semester with our network of contacts, companies, enterprises, member countries, the armed forces.
O nosso terceiro pilar são as conferências. As conferências que a gente...
Third pillar are the conferences with the lessons learned from the exercises. And this is something that we have been doing since 2019.
A Fundação Interamericana de Defesa
The member states, the Inter-American Defense Board, and we have been able to share, because we can learn, but it's important also to share it. If we don't share it, we are not going to reach our main objective. So we have been doing this. We have certain difficulties because of the pandemic, of course. And this is something that we were doing presentially, not only virtually, but we continue. We continue sharing the ideas and the competencies. And this is the third pillar, the network of contacts.
Peço que vocês aí de casa e aqui salvem essa data, 30 de outubro de 2024.
So remember this date. This is going to be October 30th, 2024. This is going to be the next Hemispheric Cyber Defense Conference. You are all invited. We hope that we can receive questions, information. We're here to disseminate the ideas, the lessons that we have learned, of course.
E qual é o futuro que a gente espera para
And what's the future
a defesa cibernética, para a cooperação
that we hope for cyber defense on the hemisphere, for the cooperation of the hemisphere? Well, in the future, we will hope to build a cooperation framework for these three pillars so we can be more assertive, more concrete, more specific, to be able to build the capacities to protect our hemisphere. We can be stronger in our member states and also as a region. So this is what we want to have, the cooperation framework for the hemisphere, for the future. Maybe a virtual school on cyber defense. This is something that we can use with the contact network for the capacity building and the ideas that are very important to share. So for the first question, together we're stronger. We cannot do this alone. Mainly on cyber defense, I believe that we need to work together. We need to promote the trust.
Essa que é o nosso principal foco aqui.
This is our main challenge and our main focus.
Aqui, se vocês querem fazer parte da nossa rede, podem escanear.
If you want to be part of our network,
vocês podem preencher para fazer parte da nossa rede, proporcionar ideias, temas para as nossas conferências, soluções, contribuir.
So this is for the ideas.
Vocês podem nos seguir nas nossas redes sociais.
For our events. And this is something that you can fill out if you want to be part of our network. Thank you for your patience, for your attention, for being with us in this presentation. Commander Luciano Moraes, thank you for the presentation. It has been very enriching on the vision, on the ideas that we have now on cyber defense.
Do incremento da discussão sobre ameaças cibernéticas.
The need of improving the conversation, the importance of the events that have to do with cyber defense of the Americas. And also important, the cooperation, as you mentioned several times, cooperation that is needed and strategic.
Inicial que foi formulado no começo.
Some of the questions that were asked at the very beginning had to do with international cooperation on cyber defense, and some of the answers that we have had about the training courses and the exercises. Another one is the execution and the education of specialized courses. The exchange of experiences as well on cyber defense, increasing the dissemination of all of the topics that had to do with cyber defense. These are contributions from the participants. This is a way for us to implement cyber defense in the hemisphere. As I said in the presentation, the cooperation has to do with the will of the member states, the participation, and the cyber defense, the contact network, the ideas, the solutions that we should contribute with, to work with IDP and to work with be facilitators, because this is something that we are. We are facilitators. We are a way on how we receive the demands of the member states. We disseminate the information with our networks, our institutions, our stakeholders, international organizations. And this is how we achieve cooperation. So what we are looking for on the cyber defense program is specifically to also coordinate with the rest of programs to receive the information and to be able to disseminate it, the ideas, as I said, to share. Again, I'll stress this out, how important it is to share the ideas and to share the lessons that we learned so we can go deeper on the cooperation. This is very important. The framework of cooperation, I'll repeat again, it's something that is needed because this is gonna tell us where we need to head on cyber defense. Thank you. Thank you for all the questions. We now would like to thank you, Commander, on behalf of the OAS and the Inter-American Defense Board. I would like to thank you for your work on cyber defense, for your participation and your presentation on this event. Thank you for being here.
Após as excepcionais apresentações de nossos palestrantes, apresentamos
After the exceptional presentation,
de Oliveira Pinto,
we
diretor
have Lieutenant General Flávio Luz de Oliveira Pinto, Brazilian Air Force. He's the Director General of the Secretariat of the Inter-America Defense Board for the closing remarks. The floor is yours. Thank you, Luciano, for your presentation. Thank you, presenters, speakers, to the whole team of organization of this important event. It's been a very successful event, and I am very satisfied to thank you all, to all of the presential audience, also the virtual audience on our Zoom platform. Commander Luciano, precisely, and I just reviewed that we have more than 1,200 devices that are connected. So we know that many people are part of this important event. So thousands have gained this knowledge. Thank you again to the presenters for being part of this event. Thank you for your participation on this important topic. Important for all of us, of course. Our objective, our proposal, was to discuss how to strengthen the cybersecurity on digital defense cooperation. And I want to highlight cooperation. Cooperation has been a key word throughout the event. Because of the digital scenario, it's constantly evolving and we have many challenges. We need to strengthen the support, the integration on something that is so essential. And this is why the main objective is cooperation. This is what we need to reach. This is our objective. We want to stimulate the development at a highest level on the hemisphere on cyber defense, so we can all contribute to dissemination of the opportunities, cooperation, and interaction on this important topic. Now, on this opportunity, I believe that we have had a community of experts from different countries to talk about very relevant situations, intellectually motivating, profound, to stimulate cooperation on the ideal environment to talk about innovation, new strategies, perceptions from the cyber defense perspective. So since 2019, IADB have had this type of activities to promote cyber defense, to promote international cooperation through seminar, through conferences, making possible to have these debates and these discussions and to strengthen the digital environment on our environment, on our hemisphere. So the emphasis is international cooperation, highlighting the importance of the new technologies that will help us on cyber resiliency on the Americas. The approach that requires multilateral perspectives for a better understanding. This is why we strengthen the commitment that is even more relevant nowadays on cyber defense, consolidating relationships and promoting common interests, sharing the best practices among the countries. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for the support, for the participation, and also to the presenters, to the speakers, because they have shared their experiences and knowledge. Thank you.
Antes de encerrar a transmissão de nossa conferência, aproveitamos a oportunidade para convidar a audiência para nosso próximo evento.
We would like to invite the audience to our International Humanitarian Law Seminar and Humanitarian Seminar on November 30th, starting at 9 through the YouTube and Zoom platforms. You can visit our website, www.hid.org, so you can see all the activities that we have on the board and to be able to participate in our common activities. Thank you for the participation, and I hope to see you next time. Have a beautiful day.